Join Wyatt Wilkins as he navigates the treacherous and exhilarating landscape of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Wyatt's journey is far from easy in a world filled with powerful heroes and formidable villains, especially for those without innate abilities. However, he has a distinct advantage: the incredible powers of Adam Eve from the Invincible universe. With her extraordinary skills at his disposal, Wyatt is ready to forge a remarkable path to greatness, striving to become one of Earth's mightiest heroes. Well, hello there. Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn in Marvel with Adam Eve's Powers, Part 1. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Wyatt Wilkins woke up feeling uncomfortable and exhausted. When he had opened his eyes, he noticed he was lying face down beside a flowing river. Confused, he pushed himself up from the bed of pebbles and dirt. But suddenly, his tired and shaking arms gave out on him. He released a pained groan as he crashed back down on the hard, wet ground. He sighed tiredly and blearily looked around his surroundings. Ugh, what the hell? He muttered. Behind him was a large lush forest full of trees, while a paved walkway lay at his feet. In front of him flowed a wide river, the early morning sunlight shining off its surface. With a grunt, Wyatt rose to his feet, only to receive a massive headache. His vision swayed and he lost his balance, resulting in him falling back into the river shore, soaking his halfway dried-out clothes once again with water. Sighing in pain and annoyance, he looked down to see several slits on his red shirt. Hold on. My shirt's not red. It's gray. Wyatt muttered as he looked at his sleeves and confirmed that his dark crimson shirt was actually gray. What is this blood? He raised his shirt and gave it a tentative sniff. Wyatt could still make out a faint iron smell despite being soaked with river water. Yep. That's blood. Wyatt nervously lifted his shirt to examine his stomach. To his relief, his torso was free of any injuries. That raises the question: how did I get covered in blood? This shirt is full of holes that look like a knife made them, yet there's not a scratch on me. Not that I'm complaining. Putting aside the mystery of why his clothes were covered in blood and holes, Wyatt stood up and walked over to the cement walkway. Okay. Moving on, how the hell did I end up here? And where are my shoes? Wyatt rubbed his face and thought back to the last thing he remembered. He had been studying non-stop for a week straight for his upcoming finals when suddenly, a deep pain struck his chest and his desk rushed up to meet his face. The sounds of several empty energy drink cans clanging onto his wooden floor rang in his ears. Inspecting his bloody shirt, pants, and lack of shoes, he vaguely remembered being in his pajamas last night. No, that didn't sound right. Wasn't he on a bridge? How did I end up here? With nothing else to do, Wyatt began walking up the paved walkway barefoot. He continued on the path until he came upon a park sign. What the hell? The Hudson River Waterfront Walkway. Isn't that in New York? Wyatt yelled and began sprinting down the path. It didn't take long for nearby buildings to come into view before New York City's impressive skyline appeared. Wyatt stood gobsmacked at the sight and ignored the shocked early morning joggers who gasped at his bloodied and wet form. Hey, kid. Are you okay? A young man asked in concern. I'm calling the police. A young woman in pink said as she pulled out her phone from her pouch. Wyatt's mind was suddenly assaulted with a wave of memories not of his own. He saw flashes and moments of the life of a 15-year-old boy, also coincidentally named Wyatt, go by him in quick succession. Starting from the boy's tragic beginnings of being orphaned in a robbery gone wrong, to being moved from an orphanage to a group home and finally, ending up in the streets. Life was hard, and happiness was a rare occurrence for Wyatt. One day, on a friend's offer, he joined a low-level gang in hopes of changing his life. But during his initiation ceremony, he had failed to pull the trigger to end a stranger's life. Despite his harsh life, Wyatt couldn't compromise his morals to end another's life for a chance to make his own slightly easier. His failure had resulted in the gang's leader stabbing him repeatedly and having his men throw his slowly dying body into the Hudson River. It was all too much for Wyatt. His hazy mind and tired body couldn't handle the strain. One of the joggers, a young man in his late 20s, rushed forward and caught Wyatt as he fell unconscious. "Throw the body in the Hudson. Make sure no one sees you." Wyatt slowly blinked awake. His green eyes scanned the white suspended ceiling above him. The rhythmic beeps of hospital equipment echoed to his left as the vital signs monitor showed his heart rate. An unfamiliar ceiling. So this is what Shinji felt, Wyatt muttered, pushing himself up. After taking in his hospital room and seeing that he was now in a hospital gown, he swung his feet off the bed and slid down to the cold hospital floor. Closing his eyes, Wyatt's mind was still abuzz with a new but still familiar lifetime of memories from the previous owner of his current body and his own. As he tried to differentiate between both lifetimes, he soon found it hard to determine which Wyatt he was. Whether that be the 15-year-old Wyatt who grew up in New York or the 21-year-old university student Wyatt who grew up in California, who was studying for several days with little sleep, hopped up on energy drinks. Now that I think about it, the lack of sleep and all those energy drinks could have caused my heart to give out, Wyatt muttered as he placed a hand over his beating heart. This situation reminds me a lot of those web stories I used to read when I was younger. Two lives merging into one. How crazy. Still, why did this happen to me? Before Wyatt could think about his crazy situation any deeper, the door to his room opened. Stepping inside, a nurse blinked in surprise at him. "Oh, good. You're awake," she said with a small relieved smile. "After 2 days, we were beginning to grow worried. Please, take it slow and sit down. I'll go get your doctor." Seeing no reason to argue with the nurse, Wyatt nodded and did as he was told. He didn't wait long for his appointed doctor to arrive and conduct a quick examination on him. "Well, young man, it seems that you're back to full health. We were getting worried after you didn't wake up for 2 days, but it turns out you just needed some rest," Dr. Patel, the doctor, chuckled slightly to ease Wyatt's nervousness. "Tell me, young man, what is the last thing you remember?" "Being stabbed repeatedly and studying for a final." Wyatt thought with a frown, his left hand rubbing his stomach unconsciously. Seeing this, Dr. Patel looked off behind him at the silent nurse that had encountered Wyatt before. "Ellie, why don't you go grab some food for our patient here? I'm sure he must be famished." "Of course, doctor. I'd hate to bring this up, but when you arrived at this hospital, you were covered in blood, young man. Oddly enough, you didn't have any injuries on your body. Can you tell me where that blood came from?" Dr. Patel said softly as he looked Wyatt in the eyes. They shared a moment of tense silence, neither of them speaking. "Shit. What do I say? I can't tell them I got stabbed and dumped into the Hudson. Especially since I don't have a wound in sight. If I were him, I'd think I was the one who killed somebody due to how much blood I was covered in." Wyatt thought quickly, his eyes locked on the floor nervously. Thankfully, the nurse, Ellie, returned with a tray of food, breaking the standoff. "We can talk some more after you get something into your system, young man. I'll be back in a little while. Try to think back on what I said," Dr. Patel said before he and Ellie left the room. "Right," Wyatt said nervously as he looked down at the rather unappetizing tray of plain-looking hospital food. Despite the plain appearance of the food, his stomach released a loud growl, reminding him that he had not eaten in 2 whole days. Using a spoon, Wyatt poked the bland mashed potatoes and unseasoned steak and took a tentative bite. Ugh, so bland. What I wouldn't do for some tacos. His eyes grew wide without warning as his vision focused on the food before him. As if his eyes suddenly became electron microscopes, he could now see the molecular structure of the food. Every atom and every molecule was clear for him to see. From the back of his mind, a library of knowledge swung open to him. The knowledge of every atom and molecule in existence flooded into his brain. Unconsciously, his hand lifted over the tray of food, and a flash of reddish-pink light illuminated the room quickly. Whoa! Wyatt flinched as he watched his once bland and boring tray of hospital food transform into a plate of delicious-looking tacos. Holy shit! Carefully, he reached out and lifted one of the tacos. Wyatt inspected the corn tortilla and the expertly cooked al pastor meat. The greens on top were fresh, and the tantalizing salsa drizzled on top made his mouth water. The mixture of smells made his stomach growl even louder, resembling a lion's roar. Ah, what the hell! With caution thrown into the wind, Wyatt took a hungry bite, and a flavor explosion filled his mouth. Like a starving animal, he finished the taco in his hand and moved on to the rest. After all the food was gone and his hunger satisfied, Wyatt stared at the empty plate with amazement. Incredible! Did I just transform one thing into another? Like alchemy? And where did all this knowledge of atoms and molecules come from? Then it hit him. Memories of him reading an old comic and watching the hit television series, Invincible, flashed in his mind. No way! Do I have Adam Eve's powers? Lifting the empty plate, Wyatt's eyes quickly zoomed into the plate's molecular structure. With a thought, he moved the plate's atoms around until a flash of reddish pink covered the plate for a split second. What was once a white plate now held a limited edition pair of black Nikes. A pair of shoes that he had worked hard to buy in his other life as a broke university student. That confirms it. I do have Adam Eve's powers. But, why? Does that have anything to do with why I'm suddenly two different people smushed into one? Wyatt transformed the pair of shoes back into the original hospital food tray. Despite having the amazing powers of Adam Eve, Wyatt couldn't help but wonder about how and why he had them. Not to mention how his mind ultimately rested within the body of the younger Wyatt rather than the older one. Standing up, he walked over to the room's bathroom. After turning the light on, he inspected his appearance. He was familiar with it, but not at the same time. Unlike his older body, the younger one he currently inhabited had messy reddish hair and green eyes. A stark contrast from his older self's black hair and brown eyes. He was also shorter and lacked any real muscle. Does this mean that my other body is just lying there, rotting away? Wyatt leaned on the bathroom sink, his heartbeat picking up. This is so messed up. Leaving the bathroom, Wyatt looked up at the small television in the corner. After looking around momentarily, he found a remote and turned the TV on. He needed a distraction. And what better distraction was there than the brain-rotting effects of television? After clicking through several channels, Wyatt ended up on what seemed to be a news channel. The words "Incident at Stark Industries" hung in the top corner of the screen while a familiar man stood behind a podium. Robert Downey Jr.? Iron Man then. I remember this scene. Too bad the movie is about to end. Wyatt sat back and continued to watch the movie. I know that it's confusing. It is one thing to question the official story and another thing entirely to make wild accusations or insinuate that I'm a superhero. Tony Stark said as James Rhodes stood beside him. Ha, that's not Terrence Howard. Why is Don Cheadle in this one? Wyatt said in confusion. I never said you were a superhero. A voice said off-screen. Wyatt frowned as the shot never changed from the single point of view of the camera. After having watched the movie dozens of times growing up, he couldn't distinctly remember how this scene played out due to it being one of the MCU's most iconic moments. Didn't? Well, good, because that would be outlandish and fantastic. I'm just not the hero type. Clearly. With this laundry list of character defects, all the mistakes I've made are largely public. Tony said, a bit derailed from the reporter's words. Wyatt watched as James leaned in to whisper into Tony's ear, but the words and shot never changed to show the audience what he said. Well, this is new? Did they remake the movie or something? Wyatt asked in confusion as he leaned in. Yeah, okay. Yeah. The truth is, I am Iron Man, Tony said, causing all the gathered reporters and television outlets to go crazy. At this point, the movie should have begun playing Black Sabbath's iconic song Iron Man, but it never did. The shot should have also ended with the end credits rolling in. But they didn't. The scene continued on with Tony calming the reporters down and answering a slew of questions with a smug smile. Wyatt slowly stood up, his eyes wide with a growing realization that he was not watching an old movie but a very real and live news feed. It can't be. Am I in the MCU? Talks regarding mutants and their place in society continue as the president. All right, class, let's go over last week's subject. Now then, the Howling Commandos, led by Captain America, is a team formed during World War II from various Allied POWs after they were rescued, along with 394 other soldiers that were held prisoners. In most recent news, Tony Stark's large arc reactor is rumored to be the future of the world's energy. But some criticize its current use. Within Wyatt's mind, a whirlwind of memories sprang forth, causing him to clutch his head in pain. This swell of memories was limited and sparse due to the younger Wyatt's disinterest in anything to do with rich billionaires, long-dead super soldiers, and the existence of mutants. He already had several of his own problems and concerns to focus on the issues of other people. Mutants? They exist here. So is this the MCU or some alternate version of it? Wyatt shook his head to remove the cobwebs and turned the television off. He was getting tired of listening to Tony Stark hype himself up to the world. As he was about to rummage through his new memories, a knock on the door brought him out of his thoughts. Wyatt watched as Dr. Patel walked in with a dissatisfied expression. Before Wyatt could ask what was wrong, 2 police officers walked into the room. I'm sorry, young man. Unfortunately, these fine officers have some questions for you. Dr. Patel frowned as one of the officers, Officer Bradshaw, pushed past him, handcuffs in hand. What is this? Wyatt asked as he stepped back. When you arrived at this hospital, you were covered in blood, but you had no visible injuries. I shouldn't have to explain how that appears. This is clearly a serious misunderstanding. But you will have the chance to clarify everything at the station. I advise you to cooperate. It will make this process much smoother, Bradshaw stated firmly as he moved behind Wyatt to secure a pair of handcuffs around his wrists. What? Look, I didn't hurt and, most importantly, kill anyone. The blood I was covered in was my own. Test it first, damn it. I'm also in a hospital gown. Don't I get any clothes first? Wyatt argued as the 2 officers began leading him out of the hospital in full view of everyone. The doctors did run a blood test. The blood on your shirt wasn't your own, the other officer, Gomez, said. For a moment, a simmering, angry heat erupted in Wyatt's chest out of nowhere, surprising him. What was that? Wyatt thought before refocusing on the officers. Aren't you guys also missing a few steps? You haven't even asked me for my name yet. Wyatt said. Listen, kid. We'll try to find you something to wear later. Just be quiet and move along. And don't worry, we'll find out exactly who you are when we get to the station, Gomez said without much care for the looks and reactions Wyatt was receiving. Now shut up already. Geez. How nice of you. Can we at least go back to my hospital room? I think I left my dignity in there. Wyatt's comment earned a stifled chuckle from a nearby nurse as they exited the hospital. A few bystanders on the sidewalk turned to stare as Wyatt was escorted into a waiting police cruiser. His state of dress earned him several whispers, laughs, and odd looks. Take a picture. It will last longer. Wyatt yelled, causing a few of the observers to actually take out their phones to take pictures as he was placed in the back seat. No. I was kidding. The 2 officers entered the cruiser and began heading through the busy New York streets. Wyatt frowned and turned away from the officers to stare out at the big city around him. Yonkers, he muttered, the name of the city coming into his mind. As he looked around, he couldn't help but be amazed at all the molecules and atoms within the world. Within the air itself. Every building, every vehicle, and everything in between was lit up with its inherent molecular structure. Wyatt was seeing the world with new eyes. It was exhilarating. Let's see. If I get taken into the station, I'm screwed. They'll most likely lock me up for suspected murder. Wyatt thought as he turned to the officer driving. In normal circumstances, I'd be boned. But now, I'm essentially a reality warper with the ability to transform matter into anything I want. Now then, let's give these new powers of mine a go. Sorry, officers. But I'm not built for the slammer. Wyatt said with a grin. What? Officer Gomez said as she turned back. Her eyes grew wide as she watched Wyatt raise his hands up as the cuffs around his wrists were now somehow made up of Legos. The once strong chain that held the cuffs together was nowhere to be seen. Wyatt grinned like a child at his creation before pointing his hands down. The police cruiser's wheels briefly flashed and transformed into solid square blocks of concrete. The officers yelped as the vehicle jerked forward and screeched to a stop. Wyatt chuckled, pushed open the door to his right, and stepped out. As he did, his hospital gown flashed with color and in its place was a hoodie jacket, jeans, and a pair of Nikes. Pulling the hood of his sweater over his head, Wyatt watched as officers Bradshaw and Gomez tried to open their doors. Unfortunately for them, the driver and passenger doors had been seemingly welded into the vehicle, leaving them trapped inside to pull on the handles uselessly. See ya. Wyatt grinned and ran off down the street, leaving behind several onlookers to stare at the altered police cruiser and trapped officers. W.O. Easy. Okay. I think I'm getting the hang of this. Wyatt waved his arms around as he glided through the air on a flying reddish-pink disc made from his powers. The night sky hung above him as he traversed over the rooftops of Queens. This should be far enough from Yonkers. With a mental command, he glided down and landed on a rooftop. After dismissing his creation, he walked over to the edge of the roof to look out at the borough of Queens and gave off a whistle. The home borough of Spider-Man. Wait. It's 2008. Spider-Man doesn't exist yet. Or does he? With the existence of mutants in this world, who knows if this world is going to follow the MCU timeline anymore? Releasing a tired sigh, Wyatt sat down and looked over to the loose brick. Grabbing it, he moved its molecules around until a box of steaming pepperoni pizza sat in his grasp. Taking one out, he took a hungry bite and watched the streets below. Yup. Still weird. But tasty. He thought. Luigi's Pizza is still better, though. Let's see, where to go from here. Can't go to my old group home. I got kicked out of there, and the place I used to crash in is full of my past would-be gang members who watched me get shanked to death. So I'm essentially homeless, again. Wyatt frowned and took another bite of his food. Lifting his left hand, sparks of his power flashed. I'm glad I listened to my parents, my other parents? Whatever. I'm glad I listened to them and studied to become an engineer. Now I can build stuff with my powers without having to worry about shit crashing over me. Standing to his feet, he used another flying glowing construct disc made up of solid energy to glide up into the sky, this time, with much smoother precision. To stay out of sight, Wyatt transformed the underside of his flying disc black to match his black clothes. Now then, where to build my Minecraft house? Wyatt spent the next half hour meticulously searching for the perfect spot to build his new home. After weighing several options, he finally decided on a secluded location beneath an isolated overpass, far removed from prying eyes. He imagined a secret passageway that would lead to a spacious, two-story underground home, carefully designed to offer both comfort and security. As he mapped out his plans, he imagined the home enveloped by walls made of lead, 2 feet thick, serving as a formidable barrier against anyone attempting to locate him with advanced technology. At least, he thought that's how that worked. Wyatt knew that in a world dominated by surveillance and high-tech tracking equipment, a secret hideout was his strongest ally. Inside, he created open spaces illuminated by soft, ambient lighting and cozy corners designed for relaxation. Each room was crafted to fulfill any need or want he could have. A hidden passageway was carefully built into one of the overpass's thick pillars, which led into the base below and was almost invisible to the untrained eye, revealing itself only to Wyatt, whose unique powers granted him access by undoing the front layer of concrete from the elevator doors. With a subtle wave of his hand, an elevator door materialized seamlessly within the sturdy embrace of one of the thick concrete columns of the overpass, a hidden portal to his underground sanctuary. Once inside the compact elevator, designed to accommodate a maximum of 3 people, the descent was smooth, the walls echoing a faint hum as they traveled deeper beneath the bustling city. At the bottom, Wyatt's underground home awaited, a haven filled with every necessity and comfort he could imagine. Equipping the space had posed quite a challenge. Wyatt had initially struggled to create the essential appliances from scratch. However, an idea of his led him on a quick detour to a local appliance store, where he utilized his ability to perform a deep molecular scan to analyze the designs and mechanisms. This skill allowed him to reverse engineer any item, making the replication of any object or piece of equipment a simple task. For the essentials of daily life, internet, electricity, and water, Wyatt tapped into the city's utilities at various points to use for himself. He hoped the people of Queens didn't mind sharing. While he had hopes of developing his own sustainable energy source for his subterranean home, he'd put it off for another night when he had the proper knowledge. But for now, Wyatt was absolutely exhausted. After the long day he had, he decided to put off those lofty plans until tomorrow. Not bad, not bad. If I put this place on Airbnb, I'd make a killing. Wyatt chuckled as he looked around his new secret base. After taking a long, hot shower to wash away the events of the day, he threw himself onto what could be considered one of the most comfortable beds in the world. It didn't take long for Wyatt to fall into a deep sleep. Amidst Casino Park's lush, emerald expanses, Wyatt perched beneath a sprawling tree. He sat apart from the scattered groups of midday visitors, an intense expression etching lines across his forehead. Before him, a plump squirrel busied itself with the nuts and walnuts Wyatt had generously scattered on the grass, its tiny paws skillfully cracking the shells. Wyatt raised his hand, its fingers trembling slightly, and closed his eyes, summoning all his concentration in an attempt to perceive the intricate molecular structure of the lively creature before him. Become a chicken. The squirrel perked up and turned to Wyatt. After a second, it lost interest and continued eating its snack. Why? I understand why Adam Eve couldn't mess with living beings, but why can't I? Do I have some hidden mental blocks I don't know about that are holding me back, too? Wyatt said with annoyance as he tried to recall anything that could have happened to him in the past. Damn it. My memories are still a jumbled mess. I can't think of anything. So much for being OP from the get-go. With a sigh, he stood up and waved his hand in front of the squirrel. The small pebbles beside it flashed, and a pile of acorns was revealed to take their place, much to the squirrel's happiness. For your troubles, Wyatt said with a small grin. With his experimentation over, Wyatt wandered around the park. As he did, he took in the sights with an easygoing smile, only for it to vanish as he thought back to the events from yesterday. He had essentially been arrested for suspected murder and had escaped captivity. Was he now essentially a wanted man? Even if the police officers didn't get his name, he didn't carry a wallet with ID or anything like that. Wyatt was sure they would pull up security camera footage to get a picture of his face and find him in their system. They shouldn't take long to figure out his name and identity. Should I have just let myself get taken in? I'm sure if I explained to them that the blood was actually mine and not someone else's, then maybe they would have let me go. Wyatt said to himself as he sat on a bench looking out at Casino Lake. No. I doubt they would. There was just too much blood on my shirt and no evidence of injury on my body. Shit, I wouldn't have believed me. What a mess. The idea of leaving New York and hitchhiking back to California popped into his mind, but he wasn't sure if he should. Despite being very early in the timeline, he was at the heart of the universe's main events. Wyatt was sure he was brought to this world and given these powers for a reason. And whatever or whoever had combined two completely different lives into one must have had a reason for placing him here in New York. Or maybe this was all one big accident and I just got the short end of the stick. Wyatt leaned back and lost himself in the blue sky above. I hope my family is okay. In his other life, in the older Wyatt's universe or timeline, he had two loving and supportive parents and an annoying little brother. At this point, they would most likely have already heard about his other body being found dead in his dorm room. He couldn't help but imagine his family's devastating expressions and cries upon his passing. The image of their tear-stained faces made his heart hurt. Are you all right, young man? Wyatt blinked and noticed that he had been crying. After quickly wiping off his tears, he saw a kind-looking older man in his late 40s or early 50s. He looked vaguely familiar to Wyatt, but he couldn't quite place where he recognized the man. Ah, yes. I was thinking about my family. Wyatt admitted. He had tried to lie, but the truth had slipped out. They were taken from me. A long time ago. I'm sorry to hear that. Do you mind if I? The older man pointed to the spot beside Wyatt. Sure, go ahead. Wyatt nodded and slid over, giving the man space to sit. I have a nephew whose parents were taken from him, too, when he was a small boy. He had to grow up without them, and I could see the pain in his eyes each day as he grew up. Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Ben Parker. Ben held his hand out with a friendly smile. Wyatt's eyes widened slightly at the name, but he quickly schooled them. He may be amazed that he was sitting next to the man who would one day define Peter Parker/Spider-Man's entire ideology, but the ache in his heart quickly melted away any excitement he could have. Reaching out, he shook the man's hand with a smile. Wyatt Wilkins. It's nice to meet you, sir. Ben nodded, and his eyes landed on a duck leading its ducklings over the lake's surface. The pain of losing one's family never goes away. But I find that thinking back on the good memories from when they were around helps alleviate the hurt. Even if it's a little. Wyatt nodded and thought back to the younger Wyatt's parents. They were good and kind people. His father was brave and held on to strong beliefs of morality, while his mother always extended a kind hand to anyone who would need it. They didn't deserve to have been killed because a thief wanted a few extra bucks. A simmering rage began to build within him. These powerful emotions had pushed the younger Wyatt to act out his entire life, which ended up with him joining a gang in the end. A gang that eventually almost got him killed. He didn't notice it until now due to the crazy revelations of his new powers and sudden placement in the MCU, but Wyatt had inherited the younger Wyatt's unreasonable rage. A rage that was eager to be released. The very same rage that had peeked out from within him when the officers from yesterday dragged him through the hospital in cuffs, humiliating him for all to see. So that's what that was. Wyatt thought. Closing his eyes, Wyatt dug deep and did as Ben said. He thought back to the good and happy times he had with his parents from both lifetimes. Ultimately, he focused on one memory from the younger Wyatt's life. It was of him and his parents having a fun day together at Coney Island. He could still vividly remember his father's amused grin and his mother's loud laugh as they rode the rides and played the games. Slowly, a small smile grew on Wyatt's face, and the pain in his chest subsided slightly. That worked. Thank you, Mr. Parker, Wyatt said. Don't mention it, Wyatt. Just happy to help. There's a saying my wife likes to say, when you help someone, you help everyone. Ben said with a loving smile. Ah, I see it now. He looks like a much older Tobey Maguire. Wyatt thought as he finally realized why Ben seemed so familiar to him. The two sat in silence and watched the ducks swim around the surface of the lake for several minutes before Wyatt stood up. Thank you for your advice, Mr. Parker. And for sitting with me. It was nice, Wyatt said with a smile. Ben shook his head with a smile of his own. Don't mention it, Wyatt. I'm just glad that my words were able to help you. Have a nice day, sir. You as well, young man. With nothing more to say, Wyatt walked off. Before he got too far, he turned back and saw Ben continue to watch the lake. He had a tranquil expression, as if lost in thought. I just talked to one of Marvel's most iconic characters. But it didn't feel that way. It was as if I were talking to a regular person, not someone from a comic or movie. This world I'm in, it's very real. Not just some comic book or movie come to life. Wyatt thought. This world is my reality now. I have to figure out where I fit in it. Looking down at his shoes, Wyatt sighed and then left the park. Sean Anderson was a kind man in his late 30s. Growing up, he had always been interested in helping those less fortunate. That's what led him to a life of volunteering and giving back to his community. This path led him to his wife, Carly, and the two decided to open up a group home for young children without a place to stay. Due to this, Sean came to know Wyatt when two social services workers came to his group with a young homeless boy in tow. Sean had always tried to be patient with all his charges, but Wyatt had always been a tough kid. And today, Sean's patience had reached its limit. In his hands, he held an empty envelope. His expression was tired and defeated. Beside him sat Carly. She had a sad expression as she sat back in a chair in their home's kitchen. The envelope in Sean's hands had once held the money that the government had given him for the group home's monthly allowance. The money was intended to buy their monthly supply of food and much-needed clothing for the children in their group home. Wyatt, how could you? You knew we needed that money. And you just took it. How could you do that? Sean looked at 14-year-old Wyatt with disappointment and anger. Carly remained silent, but she kept her eyes on Wyatt. She was afraid that if she spoke, she wouldn't be able to stop the sobs trapped in her throat. She had always wanted to help Wyatt. Help the young troubled boy work through his issues and problems. But Wyatt had always refused her help. What's the big deal? Just ask the government for more. Wyatt said it without a care, but his eyes betrayed him. The three of them stood in the home's dark kitchen. Guilt bled through him as he felt Carly's sad gaze on him, but he acted defiantly. It's not my fault you don't ask for more. Maybe if you did, we could afford to fix the damn AC. Sean was about to snap, but after taking a deep, calming breath, he looked away from Wyatt. He was tired. And he couldn't keep putting up with all the troubles and issues Wyatt brought to their home. Go, Wyatt. Leave. I can't do this anymore. I tried to give you the benefit of the doubt so many times, but you just don't seem to care. Sean said tiredly. Get out. Wyatt stepped back as if struck. His eyes were wide in shock. He glanced over at Carly, almost pleadingly, but she held firm. It killed her inside, but she agreed with her husband. After a few seconds, Wyatt's ever-present anger rose, and he gritted his teeth. Fine. Damn you and this shitty house. Wyatt yelled, uncaring that several of his fellow housemates were sleeping. His roar had quickly awakened several of them. He spun on his heel and grabbed his black backpack from the ground. With his backpack secured, he headed to the front door and grabbed the doorknob. He stood frozen for a second, his mind in turmoil, before he finally schooled himself. He opened the door and left. Slowly, Wyatt opened his eyes. Despite having slept a full 8 hours, he felt tired. After sitting up, he rubbed his face to rid any remaining sleep. What an idiot. No. I'm an idiot. The dream he had was no dream. It was a memory of the younger Wyatt's life. Or should he say, his life? Every night, Wyatt had been living out different memories of both his conjoined lives. Each new dream was getting harder to distinguish who it belonged to. It seemed that his brain was hard at work at merging both of his lifetimes together, making it all one solid stream of memories. It was getting harder to distinguish whose memories belonged to whom. Wyatt was even beginning to forget what his other body once looked like. A coping mechanism from his brain, perhaps? Last night, the memory of the reason why he had been kicked out from his group home played all throughout the night. He wasn't kicked out of the group home due to one solitary incident. No, it was due to several dozen incidents. Each time, Sean and Carly had given him a second, third, fourth, fifth, and even 20 chances to redeem himself from his rash and irresponsible behavior. But he never did. He was too angry at the world and didn't think twice about how his actions could hurt those around him. He was a selfish fool. The straw that broke the camel's back was when he stole the group home's monthly stipend from the government. The same funds that were needed to buy them all food and clothing for his fellow orphans. And what did he use the money for? He used it to pay the very same gang leader who had stabbed him to death as an enrollment fee for the gang. Yup. A big old idiot. That's me. Wyatt muttered and got off his bed. After performing a series of stretches, a flash of reddish-pink energy enveloped him, cleaning him of any grime or filth while also changing him into some casual clothing. Upon entering his kitchen, he opened his fridge to see a fully stocked fridge, a sight not too common in his past group home. Frowning, he closed the door and ignored his stomach's hungry growl. Wyatt walked over to the elevator door and pushed the up button to the side. After a few seconds, a soft ding broke the silence and he waved his hand. The outer layer of concrete hiding the elevator entrance disappeared and he stepped out. With another wave, the concrete slid over the door, as if it was never there to begin with. Taking a few steps forward, Wyatt picked up 2 rocks and transformed them into a pair of sunglasses and a black baseball hat. After placing them on, he began making the journey to Hoboken. A melodic ring echoed in Victor's old, grimy pawn shop, gaining his attention. He put down the cheap gold ring he was examining and watched as Wyatt walked over to him with his hands in his front jacket pockets. Victor kept his eyes trained on Wyatt while feeling for the hidden short-barreled shotgun under his counter. Wyatt removed his shades and hat and gave Victor an easygoing smile. "Morning. The name's Mark. Mark Grayson. I saw the sign on your shop that says you buy gold. And from word around the street, you don't ask questions. That true?" Wyatt said. After a few seconds, Victor nodded and removed his hands from his weapon in favor of leaning on the counter. But he made sure to remain close by, in case whoever stepped into his shop was another wannabe hooligan. "Yeah, that's true." "Great. How much can you give me for these?" Wyatt pulled out 3 expertly crafted gold and diamond-encrusted necklaces. Seeing them, Victor blinked in fascination and grabbed his headband magnifiers. He inspected each of the necklaces and couldn't help but marvel at their craftsmanship and quality. He had never come upon such high-quality work in all his 30 years of work. One of the necklaces could easily sell for $30,000 to $50,000. Altogether, at least $150,000 was sitting before him. Victor smiled shrewdly and eyed Wyatt. The boy was young and clearly had no idea what he had on him. This would be the easiest score he would ever make in his life. I can give you $5,000 for all 3. No one will offer you more than that," Victor said, unimpressed. "Oh wow," Wyatt said with a large smile, causing Victor to grin slightly. "That's a terrible deal." Victor blinked as Wyatt quickly took his necklaces back. "You know, I think I saw another jewelry shop down the street. Maybe I'll go there and find someone who isn't as blind as a mole. Goodbye." Wait. Victor panicked and ran around his counter as Wyatt touched the front door. "Sorry, my young friend. I meant to say that I'll give you $50,000 for your necklaces." "A good deal, no." "Just $50,000? Mateo from down the street offered me $70,000. You gotta do better than that if you want these fine works of art." Wyatt crossed his arms and gave Victor a disbelieving look. You saw it, didn't you? A man of your experience must have seen that these diamonds and gold are the purest you've ever come across. That damn Mateo. Always stealing my business. Okay. 90. I can offer you 90,000 and no more. I want 130. Gay. 130. How about 120? 120? You're disrespecting me, Victor. I went through a lot of trouble acquiring these fine necklaces. Wyatt sighed and opened the door. Victor moved as fast as he could and grabbed Wyatt's wrist. Fine. Okay. 130. I'll give you 130 for all three. Victor said with wide eyes. He hoped Wyatt wouldn't ask for more. Wyatt made a show of thinking it over before smiling. You got yourself a deal, Victor. He said and held out a hand. Maybe if you don't lowball me again, I might just come back next month with some more. Victor released a sigh of relief and shook Wyatt's hand. After retrieving the funds from his secured safe and placing them in a secured briefcase, Victor returned to the counter and received the necklaces from Wyatt. Thank you for your business, my friend. If you do ever come across more of these works of art, you can come to me. And no one else. I'll make sure you're well taken care of. Victor said with a slimy smile after giving Wyatt the briefcase. Wyatt hummed and nodded at the man's offer. Sure. As long as you don't try to shortchange me, I'll come to you and not anyone else. Don't worry, my young friend. You won't find any better offers in Hoboken than my store. I guarantee it. Wyatt nodded and left Victor's pawn shop. As he turned the corner, he put on his shades and hat and transformed the briefcase into a black Kevlar backpack with the money safely secured inside. Opening it, he looked down at the several stacks of bills and used his power to ensure that Victor didn't shortchange him. After a quick scan, Wyatt saw that the money was all there. Before coming up with his idea of creating jewelry to sell, Wyatt was tempted to create an infinite amount of dollar bills. It wasn't a bad idea, but it had its drawbacks. While he could create an endless supply of physical money, it would all be counterfeit and quickly proved worthless. In the United States, money is specially designed to prevent the use of counterfeit copies. Each bill features various security measures, such as watermarks, security threads, color-shifting ink, raised printing, UV-reactive elements, and a serial number. These markings help distinguish authentic bills from counterfeit ones, thus resulting in Wyatt's counterfeit money eventually being found out. And if the bills were ever traced back to him, then he would have a new wave of problems. So if Wyatt wanted to get real money, he would have to sell other materials or goods, such as precious ores like gold or diamonds, that he could create infinitely without any problem and sell them to those who wouldn't ask too many questions about where he got them. It may not change what I did, but at least it should help. Zipping the bag up, Wyatt slid the backpack on and was about to leave when, all of a sudden, 3 figures walked out from around the corner of a building. They eyed Wyatt with greedy eyes as they began to follow him. Seeing that the 3 thugs wouldn't stop following, Wyatt groaned and led them to a solitary alleyway. Once there, he turned to them with annoyance. What you got in the bag, boy? The first thug, a shaggy man whose arms were covered in tattoos, said. Hand it over. Now. A man with dirty blonde hair pulled out a butterfly knife and waved it around in an attempt to threaten Wyatt. The last thug, a short, balding man, simply laughed and said nothing. The wooden bat in his hand rested over his shoulder. Really? I was expecting this situation to come up sooner or later. But come on. You 3 losers are the first thugs I have to take down. Wyatt rubbed his neck. His words and lack of fear left the 3 thugs bewildered. I've got places to be. Come on. Let's do this. The hell's wrong with this kid? The dirty blonde man said. Who cares? He called us losers. Let's rough him up. With indignant roars, all three men rushed Wyatt, eager to teach him respect. Wyatt, despite having reality-warping powers, was still a little nervous. He may have put on a brave face as he talked back to the three men, but deep inside, he was intimidated. He had never gotten into a proper fistfight before. At the sight of three grown men armed with knives and a bat rushing at him, his fear only grew. "Remember, you can do anything," Wyatt whispered and waved his right hand to the side. The bat within the shorter man's grasp shifted into solid steel. Due to the unexpected weight change, the man dropped his bat on his foot, eliciting a pained scream. The knife in the first thug's hand transformed into sand and fell through his fingers. What the hell? Stomping his foot, Wyatt concentrated and extended the concrete floor to cover the legs of all three thugs, trapping them in their spots. They tried to break free, but the strength of the concrete barely allowed them to move an inch. That was easy. Wyatt said in awe and stared at himself with amazement. "A mutant. This kid is a mutant." The short man said in fear. "Shit. Listen, man, we're sorry, all right. Don't kill us." The tattooed man pleaded. "What? No, I'm not gonna kill you bozos. And I'm not a mutant. I think. Listen, just go get a real job or something. Oh, and stop breaking the law. Otherwise, I'll bury you 10 feet under the city." To prove his point, Wyatt used his powers to pull the thugs slowly into the earth. "Ah. Okay. We will. We'll turn a new leaf. Just don't bury us alive." The dirty blonde-haired man said with his two friends nodding in agreement. After giving the three men a glare, Wyatt waved his hand, breaking their concrete holds. Without wasting another second, they ran out of the alley as fast as they could. Why were they so afraid that I could have been a mutant? Are the mutants of this universe violent? Are the X-Men not a thing? Damn, why couldn't my younger self have cared more to look into these things before? Now I have to look into it at some point. But first, I need to set things right. Wyatt looked up to the sky and began to float up, thanks to the glowing disc under him. In a quiet neighborhood on the south side of Harlem, Sean pushed his lawnmower as he worked diligently to cut the grass surrounding the Anderson group home. Once he was done, he grabbed the weed whacker from the garage and was about to trim the yard around back when he saw a familiar face. "Wyatt," Sean uttered in surprise, not expecting to see the boy he had kicked out of his group home. Shame swelled within him as he eyed the 15-year-old he had given up on a year ago. "Hello, Sean," Wyatt said awkwardly. The two said nothing as they continued their staring contest until Wyatt looked around. Where is everyone?" Wyatt asked. Carly took everyone on a field trip to the Smithsonian. Jacob was excited to see the new addition to the Captain America exhibit, Sean answered. After taking a deep breath, he motioned to the house that had once been Wyatt's home for 2 years. "Would you like to come inside? Do you want something to eat? Drink?" No, I'm okay. I just came to give the group home something." Wyatt slid the backpack off and walked up to Sean. Sean accepted the bag with a confused look, but it quickly changed to shock at the sight of all the money inside. What is this? Where did you get this?" "Easy. I didn't steal it or anything like that." Wyatt raised his hands and smiled at the man, but his smile faded as he recalled the night Sean had kicked him out. "Listen, Sean. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I took the money that was meant for everyone. I'm sorry I was such an ungrateful jerk. But now, I'm trying to turn my life around and be better, and I can't do that without making things right with you in this place." "Wyatt, what I did wasn't right. I shouldn't have kicked you out of your home. That was wrong of me. I'm sorry as well. Still, this is a lot of money. It's too much." Sean closed the bag and took a deep breath. "Does this money have anything to do with why the police came asking about you?" Ah, so they did come. Wyatt sighed. No, they're looking for me for something else. It's really just a misunderstanding. The money is legitimate. I didn't steal it, so you don't have to worry about where it came from. Wyatt reached into his pocket and brought out a sales receipt, which he showed Sean. Sean bit his tongue. He had been prepared to accuse Wyatt of just that. The bag in his hands now felt heavier. Seeing Sean's reluctance, Wyatt gave him a pleading smile. Keep it. Use it to buy everyone a new wardrobe or fix up the place. Remodel the kitchen or upgrade the AC for everyone. Accept it, please, Wyatt said, his voice filled with regret. If you're not going to take it for me, take it for them, he said, looking at the empty house. Sean stared at the bag for several seconds before ultimately nodding. Okay, I will. Thank you, Wyatt. Thanks, Sean. Say hi to Carly for me. Wyatt smiled and was about to turn away when Sean stopped him. You can come back, Wyatt. There's a place for you here. This is still your home, Sean said. That's okay, Sean. Really? You've changed, Wyatt. I'm not sure what you've been through this past year, but you've changed. Sean's eyes examined Wyatt closely as if he were looking at a completely different person than the angry, troubled boy from last year. Wyatt remained silent but offered Sean a small smile. He walked away from the Anderson group home and disappeared into the streets with nothing more to say. On the outskirts of Queens, Wyatt found himself within the cavernous expanse of a long-abandoned warehouse. One well outside of any high-traffic areas and cameras. As he walked through the warehouse, he looked around and watched as the sunlight filtered through the old broken windows, casting long jagged shadows across the floor littered with trash. Parked within the building were several rusted vehicles, their paint peeling and tires long deflated. All in all, it was the perfect location for Wyatt's needs. As he took a deep breath, the musty scent of decay mingled with a faint smell of mold filled Wyatt's nose, causing it to wrinkle. Gotta be careful. Don't want to get a tetanus shot, Wyatt said as he looked around his new training center. Okay. Let's get to it. Raising his hands, Wyatt focused on the oxygen in front of him and condensed its molecular structure. He then transmuted the oxygen using his power, causing it to transform into a solid glowing reddish-pink ball of energy. Hello there, unnamed red-pink solid thing, Wyatt said as the ball floated in midair. He then commanded it to fly around in the air in random directions and patterns. With a thought, the ball began to change into random shapes. Okay. I think I got the hang of that. Let's see how many constructs I can make at the same time. Closing his eyes, Wyatt extended his arms out. Within seconds, he created 10 sphere constructs all around him. A bead of sweat began to form over his brow as he pushed himself to create 2 more constructs. Shit. It looks like all I can make right now are 12. Let's keep pushing. Over the next hour, Wyatt experimented with a number of different constructs he could create. He discovered that he could produce a maximum of 12 small constructs, each roughly the size of a basketball. 4 medium-sized constructs, comparable to a small car. He could manage up to 6. However, he was only able to create 2 large constructs, each about the size of a 1-story building. Once he was done, Wyatt was left panting on the ground to catch his breath. Damn, that's exhausting. That was like running 10 miles straight. No wonder Adam Eve couldn't spam her own constructs in the show. Wyatt muttered as he finally caught his breath. I'll test their durability later. Now for what I've been waiting for, let's learn how to fly without a disc. Wyatt grinned and tried to imitate how Adam Eve flew. Holding his arms out beside him and pressing his feet together like Iron Man, he focused his power to project a stream of energy below his feet and hands. In his excitement to fly, he accidentally applied too much of his power into his thrust. Shit. Wyatt screamed as he shot up into the air and crashed against the wall behind him. Grunting, he slid down to the ground and moaned. That could have gone better. How peculiar, murmured a bald man in his late 30s. An intricate helmet, lined with wires leading to a complex high-tech computer, rested on his head. He was seated in a wheelchair on a long platform in a large circular room. This man was Charles Francis Xavier, also known as Professor X. He is the founder and headmaster of Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, where mutants learn to control their powers for good. The device on his head was called Cerebro, a machine used to detect mutants all over the world. "What is it, Charles?" asked Aurora Monroe, also known as Storm, as she approached the professor from behind. "I've come across a fascinating young man with extraordinary abilities. If my assumptions are correct, we may have discovered an Omega-level mutant. However, something about him is unusual." Charles observed Wyatt through Cerebro as he attempted to fly in an abandoned warehouse. According to Cerebro, this young man does indeed classify as a mutant. Yet, I'm unsure if he truly possesses the X gene. The readings Cerebro is receiving are conflicting. And his mind. How could this be? Aurora asked, her curiosity piqued. "I'm not sure, Aurora. Cerebro has never run into a situation like this before," Charles replied, opening his eyes and resting his chin in thought. "The only way to confirm my suspicions is to meet this young man." Aurora nodded. "If he is indeed a potential Omega-level mutant, we can't take any chances. I'll gather a small team to meet him." "What is his name?" "His name is Wyatt Wilkins," Charles said. "Yeah, I can fly," a bruised and tired Wyatt said with a grin as he flew 10 feet above the ground. From under his feet and hands, reddish-pink energy crackled as it kept him afloat. With slight difficulty, Wyatt flew side to side with a childish smile. Turning to the open space within the warehouse, Wyatt began to slowly fly and swoosh around the enclosed area. In his excitement, Wyatt increased his speed too fast and was about to crash into the ceiling. Acting quickly, he undid a portion of the warehouse's rooftop and flew out into the open sky. Now out in the open, Wyatt looked down below him to see several worn-down buildings beside the warehouse he had been using to train his powers. This small section of Queens had been essentially abandoned and left to rot. Even now, he could see that those few who inhabited this space mainly were the homeless and petty criminals. Considering that he was already outside and that there wasn't a clear chance that anyone could be watching him, Wyatt decided to take this opportunity to fly around in the open sky. Still, he made sure to stay low as to not gain any unwanted attention. As he flew around, Wyatt couldn't help but relish in the pure sensation of being airborne, free from the restrictions of being bound to the ground. There was no better sensation than that of flying through the air. Pausing, Wyatt looked out to see the Manhattan skyline. The iconic city stood in the distance, filling him with a deep sense of nostalgia. After taking a deep breath, Wyatt focused on the density of the air around him. With a mental command, he reduced density within a foot around his body and immediately felt the resistance of gravity trying to bring him down lessen. Even with the density of the air lessening around him, he still felt his body naturally want to descend. But the effect allowed him to propel himself in the air more easily. "Ah, much better," Wyatt muttered. Wyatt wanted to test his limits and see how fast he could fly, but it was still midday, and he didn't want to risk being seen. He didn't need S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra, or any other secret organization turning their attention on him, at least not until he had a better understanding of his powers. Looking at the energy being propelled from his hands, Wyatt frowned. He stopped the flow of energy coming from his hands and relied on the thrust coming from his feet to keep him afloat. Immediately, his balance was thrown off, causing his arms to flail around to try to right himself. Opening his hands, he reactivated their thrust. Okay, that wasn't as easy as I thought. Still, if I ever have to fight in midair, I have to learn how to fly without relying on my arms to keep my balance, Wyatt said with a nervous grin. For the next 2 hours, Wyatt tried to learn how to fly without his hands aiding in his propulsion. Throughout this time, he lost his balance and focus several times, resulting in him almost crashing down on the ground several times. Due to all these near misses, he decided to err on the side of caution and fly closer to the ground. Shit. Why is this so difficult? Wyatt growled as he looked down at himself as he hovered over the ground. Eve made this look so easy. What am I doing wrong? He whispered. It's possible you're overcomplicating it. I know I struggled to learn how to fly properly at first. A new voice said from behind Wyatt. Not expecting a reply, Wyatt lost his concentration and fell to the ground. Luckily for him, he was only 4 feet above the floor. Ignoring the pain of falling on his behind, Wyatt shot to his feet and turned to see the owner of the new voice. She was young, possibly a year or so older than Wyatt, with long red hair and green eyes. The girl was also dressed in a black and green suit. On her shoulders were large red circles with X's in the center. Her name was Jean Grey, a member of Charles Xavier's X-Men. Behind Jean were several other figures dressed in different costumes. Among them were Scott Summers, Kitty Pryde, Kurt Wagner, Rogue, Evan Daniels, and Aurora Monroe. Wyatt blinked and said nothing at the sight of several members of the X-Men. But something about their costumes and appearances didn't sit right with Wyatt. They're all so young. They don't resemble their movie counterparts at all. The only one that comes close is Storm. Wyatt thought. The X-Men took Wyatt's silence for fear and tried to lighten the mood. Easy there, friend. We're not here to cause you any harm. We're just here to help. Kurt Wagner, Nightcrawler, said with a friendly smile while raising his hands disarmingly. His thick German accent bled through his words. He's right. We're not here to hurt you, Wyatt. Even though we all pretty much just snuck up on you dressed in costumes, we're not here for anything nefarious. Trust me. Kitty joked, hoping to ease Wyatt's stiff posture. I'm Kitty, by the way. The fuzzy elf there is Kurt. What? Who are you people? And why are you all dressed for Halloween? Wyatt said carefully while playing ignorant. Despite knowing who they were in a general sense, he wasn't aware of this iteration of the X-Men. These aren't Halloween costumes, bub. A low, gruff voice said from behind Wyatt. Using his powers, Wyatt flew up into the air and turned to see a strong, hairy man in a black and orange suit. A sharp mask rested over his face while he eyed Wyatt carefully. This man was Logan Howlett, the legendary Wolverine. No way. Wyatt thought in amazement at the sight of Wolverine. He had always been a longtime fan of the character, and seeing him in the flesh was incredible. Despite the mask, he could make out that this Logan had the appearance of Hugh Jackman. Holy shit, Wyatt thought. His inner fanboy sneaking through. To the X-Men, Wyatt's reaction to Logan was taken as fright at the man's sudden appearance, causing them to worry they were about to frighten off Wyatt. Slowly, Aurora and Jean flew up a few feet away from Wyatt with gentle expressions. We apologize if we frightened you, Wyatt. That was not our intention, Aurora said with a caring smile. I can understand if our friend Logan there scared you. For that, I apologize. Logan growled lowly and sniffed the air. He paused and eyed Wyatt. There was no fear coming off the boy. Odd kid. Logan thought. We were sent to come find you, Wyatt. We believe you're like us. A mutant. A person gifted with extraordinary abilities and talents. We're all from the Xavier Institute. It's a school that can help you understand and gain better control over your powers. You're more than welcome to join. That is, if you want. We won't force you to do anything you don't want. Jean said. He's the potential Omega-class mutant? He doesn't seem like much to me. Evan whispered to Scott. Stop. We don't want to scare him off. We don't need the Brotherhood gaining another potentially powerful member. Scott whispered to Evan, who nodded. Okay. Calm down. Gotta act like I don't know what's going on and who they are. Which I technically don't. Wyatt thought and visibly calmed down. You two are flying. And that guy's blue. You're saying that everyone else here has abilities. Wyatt said as he, Aurora, and Jean descended to the ground. That's right. Everyone at the Xavier Institute has some ability or power. You wouldn't be out of place there. Rogue said with a thick southern accent. Wyatt turned to her and raised an eyebrow at her. This version of Rogue is definitely not from the movies or the classic animated series. She's goth. Not that it's a bad thing. Wyatt thought and nodded to Rogue. So, you're all mutants? Wyatt asked carefully as he looked down at his hands. We are. Is that a problem? Scott asked with a hint of steel in his voice. Oh, no. I don't have anything against mutants. Really? If anything, I'm just confused as to why it seems that a good number of the population has an issue with you. Or us, I guess. Wyatt said the memory of his confrontation with the scared thugs from a few days ago was still fresh in his mind. There's a reason for that, unfortunately. Aurora sighed and gave Wyatt a small smile to rid herself of her thoughts. We can explain everything to you at the Xavier Institute. It would be safer there. Wyatt frowned, a little confused at what Aurora meant at the end. Even so, he nodded and accepted her offer. If it weren't for his meta-knowledge of the X-Men and their values and mission to save any mutant in need and to coexist peacefully with humans, he would have most likely run away or fought them. He would try to, at least. At his current level, which was no level, he doubted he could escape from the Wolverine. Sure thing. How do we get to this institute? Do we walk or? Wyatt said with a false confused look. He already had an idea of how they all got here. Walking? No, my friend. We ride in style. Kurt exclaimed with a wide grin as he gestured dramatically for Wyatt to follow him through the quiet, desolate streets and approached a large, empty lot. As they reached the center of the lot, Scott pressed a button on a small remote. With a soft humming sound, a pulse of energy radiated through the air, illuminating the area for a brief moment. Suddenly, a striking black aircraft, reminiscent of a futuristic jet, materialized before them, its sleek lines and polished surface glinting in the dim light. This is the X-Jet. Pretty cool, right? Scott said, a note of pride evident in his voice. The aircraft exuded a sense of power and sophistication, its wings poised elegantly like those of a predatory bird. Wyatt marveled at the sight, feeling the thrill of excitement tingling at the edges of his senses. Wyatt was geeking out internally as he looked at the large, impressive aircraft. It was the X-Men's legendary Blackbird/X-Jet. No matter what iteration of the X-Men it appeared in, the jet was always a fantastic sight. No, not cool. It's awesome. Wyatt said as the door to the jet descended down in front of him. Captain George Stacy reviewed the documents that Officer Bradshaw had brought to his attention. Standing beside Bradshaw was Officer Gomez, his tumultuous partner, who tried to conceal her disappointment, but her displeasure was clearly evident. The evidence from the lab is clear, Captain Stacy. The blood on the shirt that Wyatt Wilkins was wearing when he was brought to the hospital doesn't belong to him. At least not completely, Bradshaw reported, standing at attention. After further testing from our forensics team, it does seem like at least half of the blood belonged to him. This leads me to believe that he may have been involved in some sort of fight. Even so, there haven't been any missing person reports or any bodies found where those joggers found Wyatt. I don't believe the kid attacked or killed anyone. He didn't seem the type and he didn't have any injuries from a confrontation that would have caused that much blood loss. But there was something else the guys from the lab found odd. When they were running more tests to try and determine if the blood on Wyatt's shirt matched anyone within our system, the blood suddenly evaporated. That's because that thing is a mutant, Gomez interjected disdainfully. It probably has some healing powers or something. Don't tell me you've forgotten what its kind did to my brother. Even if there is a 1% chance that thing didn't kill anyone, which I doubt, it still assaulted us and destroyed city property. It needs to be brought in. His name is Wyatt Wilkins, Officer Gomez. He's a person, a citizen of New York, not an it. And he's just a kid, Bradshaw replied, frowning at his partner. And he didn't assault us. We managed to escape our cruiser after opening the windows. Fine, he's a freak, Gomez retorted. Damn it, Gomez. We don't even know if he has the X gene. He could be a regular kid. Bradshaw said in exasperation. Gomez growled and was about to respond when George slammed his hand on the table. Enough, George interrupted, placing Wyatt's file on the desk. Within it, he found a record of Wyatt's past transgressions, mostly repeated minor offenses and an arrest for stealing from a convenience store. There was even a copy of the note Wyatt had left when he had run from his group home, absolving his caretakers from any wrongdoing of child neglect. Even if we haven't yet found a victim or a body to connect with the blood found over Wyatt's shirt, the kid still fled from the police and used his abilities to damage city property. He needs to be brought in and questioned. Bradshaw frowned but nodded in agreement. Gomez appeared pleased with their police captain's decision. With their orders clear, they left George's office to continue their daily duties. Once his subordinates were gone, George sighed and opened the folder again. His eyes fell upon Wyatt's photo, age, and the mention of his deceased parents, who had been gunned down in front of him when he was a child. 15 years old, just a year older than my Gwen, he said with a weary sigh. While it has not been proven that Wyatt hadn't harmed anyone as of yet, he still used his apparent abilities to transform city property and escape police custody, both of which brought heavy consequences. As a father, George understood that Wyatt was likely facing a challenging period in his life. However, the law must be upheld, and it was his duty as captain to enforce it. Even so, George hoped that his officers, especially Officer Gomez, would act with professionalism and not mistreat Wyatt should they ever find and detain him. George knew that prejudice against mutants was growing every day as more people accepted the sensationalized stories perpetuated by the media, which painted all mutants as inherently dangerous and to be feared. He was more than aware of the slowly increasing hate crimes being committed by those few who awaken the X gene, a matter that George took with the utmost seriousness when it came to punishing such individuals who thought they could get away with attacking innocent people, mutants or not. However, he alone couldn't stop the growing swell of hatred and ignorance against mutants. This was all due to that one incident that had been proven an accident by officials but twisted into an act of violence by the media, who had deep prejudices against mutants. Watch yourself, kid, George muttered before moving on to his next order of business. Wyatt struggled to contain his excitement as he rode in the X-Men's Blackbird. This is so cool, he thought, gripping the seatbelt straps. So, what's your deal? Is flying all you can do? Evan asked Wyatt from the seat beside him. His question caught the attention of the rest of the team. Not exactly. My abilities are complicated, Wyatt replied, considering how to describe his powers without going into too much detail. Simply put, I can transform one thing into another by altering their atomic makeup. Wow. That sounds cool. Kurt grinned and teleported next to Wyatt. Can you show us? Kurt, we talked about using your powers while the X-Jet is flying. Scott frowned at the blue mutant, only for Kurt to wave him off. It's fine, it's fine. Sure, I can show you. As Wyatt was about to demonstrate his powers, Logan's gruff voice interrupted him. No powers while we're in the air. Save it until we get to the school. We don't want to have an accident 1,000 feet in the air, Logan said in a no-nonsense tone. Beside him, Aurora nodded in agreement. Logan is right. We'll have plenty of time to see what Wyatt can do once we land. Be patient, she added. Kurt sighed in disappointment at their teacher's words. Wyatt chuckled lightly as Kurt returned to his seat. Looking around the X-jet, Wyatt couldn't help but wonder if he could create something as advanced as the jet itself using his abilities. I need a deeper look, Wyatt thought. Wyatt closed his eyes and placed a steadying hand at the base of his chair, feeling the cool metal beneath his fingertips as he gathered his thoughts. With intense focus, he began to release pulses of his power, sending them cascading outward like ripples in a pond into the jet. Each pulse reverberated through the jet's structure, much like an MRI scan maps the intricate details of the human body. As the waves of energy flowed from him, they painted a vivid picture in his mind, a detailed analysis of the ship's construction and composition. He could almost see the layers of metal and composite materials woven together, the structural integrity of the frame, and the precision of the engineering that had gone into its design. Wyatt had created his pulse skill when he had struggled to create the various appliances for his underground home using his pure knowledge. It had come to him on the spur of the moment. Why couldn't he just scan an object or item and memorize how its composition worked? And now that he was on the X-jet, it was the exact same as when he had scanned a refrigerator. Just on a larger scale. With each successive pulse, he absorbed more of the jet's knowledge, turning the ship's complex architecture into something he could comprehend and manipulate, a mental blueprint. I see, so that's how I would make it. Still, if I ever tried to recreate it, it would take a significant amount of energy and time. It's super intricate. Not to mention, I can't necessarily create its inner programming using my powers. I can create ones and zeros, Wyatt thought as he stored the X-jet's blueprint away in his mind. What are you doing? Kitty asked from across the aisle, her eyes going over Wyatt's boyish appearance. He's pretty cute, Kitty thought, taking in his features. Oh, I was just scanning the jet's molecular and structural makeup, Wyatt said as if describing the weather. You can do that? Rogue asked, intrigued. More importantly, why would you do that? Scott asked, raising an eyebrow in suspicion. I can do that and more, Wyatt replied with a shameless grin. Why, you ask? I was curious if I could make my own X-jet. What? I take it this Charles Xavier guy is pretty rich, Wyatt said. As the X-jet descended, Wyatt looked around the expansive property of the Xavier Institute for Gifted Youngsters. Large plots of land with immaculately well-maintained grass and greenery surrounded a massive mansion in the center. Behind the mansion was an equally impressive pool. Has it been blown up yet? Wyatt thought with a chuckle as he recalled the several times the mansion below them had been blown up in the Fox X-Men movies. What gave you that idea? Was it the giant mansion or the miles of land? Kitty joked as she leaned over Wyatt as he looked out one of the jet's windows. Down below, the mansion's front courtyard began to shift and move with a mechanical whirl. Slowly but efficiently, the courtyard slid back to reveal a landing pad deep underground. Logan expertly piloted the jet down into the hole for a smooth landing. Once the jet was parked, the courtyard above them returned to its original position. That was awesome, Wyatt said as everyone undid their seatbelts and stepped out of the jet. Once outside, Wyatt looked around the X-Men's hangar bay with awe. I know, right? It's epic. Kurt grinned and patted Wyatt's shoulder. Come on. Chuck is waiting, Logan said as he guided Wyatt through the mansion's underground level. It didn't take long for them to reach the main level of the mansion, but before Logan could lead Wyatt to Charles's office, they came upon the man waiting for them in the mansion's front lobby. Hello there. I am Professor Charles Xavier, the founder of this fine institution. I'm happy you accepted our invitation to come here to meet with me, Charles said with a friendly smile as he moved forward on his chair. It's nice to meet you, Professor Wyatt Wilkins, Wyatt said as he held out a hand. Despite his excitement at meeting the X-Men, he was nervous that Charles's incredible abilities would pick up on his thoughts. He hoped the man wasn't poking inside his brain. Seeing Wyatt's outstretched hand in greeting, Charles chuckled and grasped it. It's nice to meet you, Wyatt. We have much to discuss," Charles said. Charles moved their conversation to his office, only bringing along Aurora and Logan, leaving out the rest of the young X-Men, much to their disappointment. Even so, after the doors to his office closed, Kurt, Evan, and Kitty pressed their ears against the doors to try and listen in on the conversation, ignoring Scott's words to respect their professor's privacy. "It's crazy to believe that this mansion was made to be a school for mutants," Wyatt said as he sat in one of the office chairs. Charles took his place behind his desk while Aurora sat beside Wyatt. With his mask removed, Logan remained standing. His arms were crossed while leaning against a wall. "I hope you don't mind me asking. But why? Why did you set up this school?" Wyatt asked, playing up the role of an oblivious newcomer. At the same time, he wanted to understand what kind of man this version of Charles Xavier was. "My dream, Wyatt, is to create a world where humans and mutants can live together peacefully. To accomplish this, we have to help our fellow mutants gain control over their emerging abilities and mutations. Not to mention to help them better understand themselves and their place in the world. That's why I created my institution," Charles said with a proud smile. "The professor's work has helped several other mutants to understand themselves. If it weren't for him, they risked losing control of their abilities and exposing themselves. Right now, that's a dangerous position for any mutant to find themselves in." Aurora said sadly, "I was meaning to ask, why do some people think that mutants are these scary and dangerous individuals to run away from? The other day, when a few thugs tried to rob me, they ended up freaking out when I used my powers to stop them. They thought I was going to kill them," Wyatt asked. "You haven't heard? Aren't you from the city?" Logan said with a suspicious frown. "I find that a little hard to believe. Until 2 weeks ago, I was completely normal. No powers. No, nothing. I didn't have any interest in looking into mutants. Heck, I still thought that mutants were made-up stories by the media." Wyatt said, "I also had my own problems to focus on. So I didn't have time to worry about anything else other than how I would get through the day." He added that the memories of him living on the streets and trying to gain a place in the gangs that ultimately got him killed played in his mind. Charles hummed cryptically before nodding. Despite not peering into Wyatt's mind, he sensed that Wyatt was being truthful. "You see, Wyatt, the existence of mutants had been a well-kept secret. That was until 2 years ago when the tragedy of Sasha Connor occurred." "Who's Sasha Connor?" Wyatt asked. Sasha Connor was a young 12-year-old girl who lived in Staten Island. She had recently discovered her mutant abilities, which allowed her to create small orbs of light that resembled tiny fireflies. At first, these orbs seemed harmless. However, one day, while she and her father were out buying groceries, Sasha's powers became unstable. The small harmless balls of light suddenly grew to 20 times their original size. Charles sighed briefly, his eyes half-lidded. Before she realized what was happening, she had accidentally unleashed dozens of these energy orbs into the store. Now larger and more powerful, the glowing spheres scorched and obliterated everything in their path, including everyone present in the grocery store, along with Sasha and her father. "My only regret is that I didn't get to her when she first awakened to her mutation. That tragedy could have been avoided," Charles added. "Chuck, that wasn't on you," Logan said with a sigh. "It's impossible to keep up with every emerging mutant." That's terrible," Wyatt uttered. His mind scrambled to find any information about the event. He found nothing. He cursed his younger self for not caring about anything else but himself. But how did everyone find out she was a mutant? Sasha's mother, in her deteriorating mental state, provided all the information about Sasha's abilities to someone she believed was a reporter acting in good faith. Along with her testimony and the surviving video footage from the grocery store, the reporter delved deeper into Sasha's medical history and discovered the presence of the X gene in her autopsy. He then sold the story to the highest bidder, and the existence of mutants was brought to light. Ororo continued, "At first, this news wasn't taken seriously. However, as several doctors began conducting further tests on various patients to disprove the X gene's existence, they ultimately found evidence that it was real. Though rare, the X gene did exist, and when those same patients began to exhibit their abilities or mutations around puberty, the truth became undeniable. It didn't take long for them to release their findings, and the existence of mutants was now apparent for everyone to see. I don't get it. If the existence of mutants is so well known, why aren't there more cases of mutants running around? Why aren't they on TV? Shouldn't they be all over the news?" Wyatt asked. "Look at Tony Stark. He's been Iron Man for a few weeks, and he's all over the news. You can thank the government for keeping everything related to mutants under strict control. They want to avoid any more disasters like the one at Staten Island. But it gets worse from there. Not too long ago, the government created a response team to apprehend mutants. The MRD, the Mutant Response Division. They take anyone they discover with the X gene, regardless of whether or not their abilities have shown up yet," Logan said with a growl. "Wait. You're telling me that they're taking mutants away? Like, they're just kidnapping people off the street?" Wyatt's eyes were wide at the revelation. "They can't do that. That's not right." "Unfortunately, they are. And they have full authorization to do so. Using Cerebro, the very same device I used to find you, I've detected several mutants concentrated in a secret high-security compound. For what purposes those young mutants are being brought there, we're not sure," Charles said, his face tight with regret and anger. "We try our best to find any emerging mutant and bring them here, where it's safe. But we're not always successful." That's... Wyatt didn't know what to say. He had just received a plethora of information regarding the world he now inhabited. This wasn't just the MCU anymore. It was so much more. "That's wrong." "It is. It's why this school is so important. Here, we keep young mutants safe and help them learn how to control their abilities. Outside of the government's reach. My agreement with the president ensures that. And one day, I hope we can show the world that mutants and humans can coexist peacefully," Charles said with hope. Rolling around his desk, he held out a hand to Wyatt. "This can be your home as well, Wyatt. You'll be safe here with us. We can help teach you to gain control over your abilities." Wyatt blinked and looked down at Charles's extended hand. Wyatt found it hard to refuse Charles's offer, especially after hearing about everything that was happening. Wyatt knew he would become an even bigger target if Charles was telling the truth about the situation. He had no real reason to refuse his offer. Even so, he had just come upon a newfound freedom he never had before. Did he really want to join a new group home, no matter how exciting it would be to live with the X-Men, after having left his most recent one? "I'm sorry, Professor. I can't," Wyatt said after debating the offer. Raising his hands, Wyatt took a deep breath and clenched them into fists. "For several years, my life's been one long struggle. It wasn't until I awakened to these powers that I started to actually feel free. I can do anything." To prove his point, Wyatt waved his hands, and the walls of the room were transformed into solid gold, emerald, diamond, and silver, surprising Charles, Logan, and Ororo. "Anything I can imagine, I can create. I have limitless potential. And if anyone thinks they can come around to try and take my freedom away from me, then they're gonna be sorely disappointed." Charles looked around at the changing room with awe until his surroundings returned to normal. It was as if his office was never altered to begin with. "I believed you were only capable of creating energy constructs and flight. But you're also capable of altering matter itself. Extraordinary." "Yeah, my powers deepen my understanding of the world and its atomic and molecular makeup. With that knowledge, I move a few molecules here and there, and bam, I can change anything into whatever I want. Well, anything but living sentient creatures. Wyatt said more calmly as he scratched his chin. At least, not yet. I think. You gotta be kidding me, Logan said as he touched one of the walls. You believe you can also alter living creatures? Aurora said in amazement. If what Wyatt said was true, then Charles was right. The boy had the potential to be an Omega-level mutant, especially as he grows older and more powerful. I'm pretty sure I can. There's no reason why I shouldn't be able to. I can see the molecules that make up the human body. I just can't move them like everything else. I think something in my mind is stopping me, Wyatt said as he held the side of his head. Turning to Charles, Wyatt gained an idea. An idea he didn't completely think through. I'd be unstoppable if I could get Charles to help remove whatever is blocking me from using my full power. Wyatt thought with excitement as he imagined himself being able to transform life itself. You believe you have some sort of mental block? If you don't mind, I can look within and see what the issue could be. You see, my mutant abilities grant me the power of a telepath. Charles said, much to Wyatt's delight. Hold on, Chuck. That may not be a good idea. Changing the walls to gold is one thing. But being able to change a person into Swiss cheese is something entirely different. Logan said as he stepped up to his longtime friend. I don't think anyone should have that type of power. Especially not some kid who's still going through puberty. Hey! Wyatt said in mock indignation. Logan. Aurora stepped forward to grab Logan's arm. That's not your decision to make. No, I get it, Wyatt said with a small smile. While he was excited at the prospect of being able to manipulate life, he could understand where Logan was coming from. Knowing someone had that level of power is pretty scary. Turning to Logan, Wyatt had an idea. He squinted his eyes and made a show of examining the long-lived Mun. By the way, Mr. Logan, why is it that adamantium is covering your skeleton? Wyatt looked out the large window of his temporary room within the Xavier mansion, his expression contemplative. The day's events and the new information he had encountered swirled in his mind. He sighed and turned to the small desk in the corner of the room. With a wave of his hand, he transformed the wooden table into adamantium, a material he had been unable to create until today. Despite his extensive knowledge of the molecular makeup of almost everything known to humankind, such as URU, vibranium, and other rare materials, Wyatt still had gaps in his understanding. It was only thanks to scanning Logan's adamantium-covered skeleton that he had learned how to create the incredibly rare metal. When Wyatt revealed to Logan that his skeleton was coated in adamantium, the Mun felt both angry and confused. Logan had always known that the material encasing his skeleton was unnatural, but he had been unaware of its origin due to his amnesia. Eager for more information, Logan pressed Wyatt for details, and so did Charles and Aurora. Sorry, I just know the name and composition of the material. The only reason I was able to detect it within you was because I was able to see your biological makeup. That's as far as my powers go when it comes to interacting with sentient life forms. Moving on from that, having that adamantium within you is dangerous, Mr. Logan. It's a poison, Wyatt explained. In any iteration of the X-Men, Logan's adamantium skeleton would eventually become a severe hindrance when his healing factor eventually fails to keep up with the long-term poisoning effects of the adamantium. It was only thanks to that very same healing factor that he was capable of surviving for so long. Recalling the events from the film Logan, Wyatt explained to Logan that he could safely remove the adamantium from his body. This decision came with both pros and cons, which Logan weighed carefully. After consulting with Charles and Aurora, they all agreed that it was best for Logan to have the adamantium removed. Thanks to Wyatt's powers, the process was quick and painless. It was no issue for him to reach inside Logan's body and dematerialize the adamantium. When Wyatt finished, he created a solid block of adamantium, the same amount that was once inside the Mun, for Logan to keep. Said block would be stored away in their basement lab. Why are Logan's claws still coated in adamantium? Ororo asked when Logan extended his claws, revealing his iconic metal claws. I thought I'd leave those as they are. I didn't want to strip Mr. Logan of his most dangerous weapons. But if you ever start feeling any negative side effects from them, I'll remove them, Wyatt replied, and Logan nodded in agreement. I feel lighter. More agile, Logan remarked, jumping in place. A slight grin spread across his face as he felt as if he were walking on clouds. Thanks, kid. I owe you one. Now back to the present. Wyatt waved his hand and changed the adamantium table back to its original material. Just when I thought this world was complicated enough, now I have to worry about the government kidnapping mutants and taking them to some super-secret facility, he said. After Wyatt extracted the adamantium from Logan, Charles suggested that he would explore Wyatt's mind the next day to uncover anything that might be blocking his full potential. Wyatt agreed with his decision and agreed to join Charles and the rest of the team for dinner at the man's invitation. It's almost time. Wyatt walked over to the large mirror near an extravagantly built dresser, and a wave of light washed over him. He now stood clean and dressed in a new casual outfit. Besides flying, this is the best part of my powers, he said with a grin. As he opened the door, Wyatt was surprised to see Kitty standing on the other side with her hand raised, ready to knock. She blushed slightly in embarrassment and quickly brought her hand down. Hey, I was just coming to get you. Wait a minute. Where'd you get those clothes? She asked. I made them. With my powers, I don't need to go out shopping. I can just create anything I want. Wyatt smiled as she led him to the dining room. Kitty's eyes grew wide in awe, and a jealous look overtook her expression. What? No fair. Your powers are, like, so broken. What I wouldn't give to be able to create any outfit I could dream of. All I can do is walk through walls. It's so lame compared to yours. Don't say that. Your powers are awesome. Wyatt stopped walking and smiled broadly at Kitty. With the right training, I'm sure you'll be untouchable in a fight. Just imagine it. You'll be an unstoppable force of nature that can move through the battlefield like a ghost. There's no end to what you could do with your powers. Don't count yourself out, Kitty. Kitty blinked at the unexpected compliments she received. Her face erupted with a blush as she brushed a strand of her hair behind her ear. Oh, thank you, Wyatt. That was nice of you to say. No worries. Let's go eat, Wyatt said and continued walking, leaving the teenage girl alone with her thoughts. Once within the dining room, Wyatt joined those already present and began exchanging casual conversations with Kurt, Evan, and Rogue. Now that we have you, can you show us how your power works? Kurt said with a curious smile. Sure. No problem. Wyatt chuckled and grabbed one of the forks on the table. In an instant, the stainless steel fork transformed into a Rubik's Cube. No way. How'd you do that? Evan asked in amazement as he grabbed the Rubik's Cube and began to play with it. It really works. Wow. What else can you make? Rogue asked as she took the Rubik's Cube from Evan. Oh, pretty much everything, Wyatt said, only to regret it once Kurt began to list off several random items for him to create. Are you ready, Wyatt? Charles asked as he looked down at Wyatt from his position on an examination bed. He and a small team were all within one of the laboratory rooms down in the basement. Logan, Ororo, and Jean stood off to the side, observing and prepared to act in case something goes wrong. Go for it, Professor. Wyatt gave Charles a thumbs up before closing his eyes. Despite his outward cheery attitude, he was a little worried over what Charles would find. Wyatt hoped that his otherworldly knowledge would be missed by the powerful telepath. Very well. Let's begin, Charles replied as he placed his hands over Wyatt's temples and closed his eyes. After a moment of concentration, Charles began the process. Charles opened his eyes and blinked in confusion as he floated in an expansive space. Stars and distant galaxies filled the black expanse as he looked around with wide eyes. Even now, I can't peer into his mind, Charles said as he struggled to look through Wyatt's highly guarded mind. Ever since he had initially discovered Wyatt's location, thanks to Cerebro, he had tried to look within the boy's mind. However, much to his shock, he was unable to do so. A fact that left him bewildered. It felt as if Wyatt were wearing a helmet that could block his telepathic power, similar to his brother, Cain Marco. Even after Wyatt was brought to the mansion, Charles tried once again to see within Wyatt's mind. He hoped that their closer proximity would help, but unfortunately, he was met with nothing again. It wasn't until Charles used direct physical touch that he was finally able to enter Wyatt's mind. What is this? Charles pondered as he floated. But much like in the physical world, Charles couldn't peer into Wyatt's mind. Something was blocking him. There was nothing, no thoughts, no memories, no access. Nothing. Charles had hoped to catch a glimpse into who Wyatt truly was to ensure the boy wasn't a potential threat, especially considering his reality-bending abilities. "You should not be here," a booming voice replied, each word laced with power. Suddenly, a crimson comet shot toward Charles from the depths of space. In an instant, the comet reached him, and a flash of light briefly blinded him. When he blinked and regained his vision, he gasped as a mun made of pure red and white energy floated before him. An aura of power radiated from the radiant figure, and his glowing white eyes stared at Charles with indifference but also a look of familiarity. "Professor, it's good to see you again. However, you must leave this mind. He is not ready." "Not yet," the powerful being stated, raising his hand. "I will only say this once. Do not attempt to do this again. Farewell, old friend." "Wait. Who are you? What are you? Why are you in Wyatt's mind?" Charles demanded as he struggled against the being's might. It didn't take him long to realize that he was no match for the figure. The being said nothing but waved his hand. "Gah!" Charles gasped as he was pushed out of Wyatt's mind and sent rolling back in his chair. Before he could collide with the wall, Jean caught him with her telekinesis. "Chuck!" Logan exclaimed as he and Aurora rushed forward. Jean looked at her mentor with concern, then glanced over at Wyatt. He was bleeding from his nose and eyes. But otherwise, he was unmoving. Panic surged within her, and she was about to rush to Wyatt's aid, her hand raised, ready to offer assistance. Before she could reach him, Charles stopped her. "Stop, Jean. Don't touch his mind." Charles shouted. "What did you see, Professor?" Aurora asked. Charles wiped the sweat from his forehead and took a moment to regain his composure. "Something powerful." Floating high in the sky, Wyatt frowned as he stared out at the horizon. He closed his eyes, trying to soothe the painful fading headache he had after he woke up. So much for being OP right away, Wyatt muttered to himself. When Wyatt woke up, it became evident that Charles's attempt to remove whatever was blocking his full power had failed. While he was inside Wyatt's mind, Charles admitted he was unable to identify what was hindering Wyatt's potential. "I'm sorry, Wyatt. There's a chance that you might not be capable of manipulating living matter after all. I believe you should focus on mastering your current abilities first and try to tackle this matter at a future date," Charles said. Though the olderman hid it well, Wyatt could tell that Charles wasn't being entirely truthful. The Mun had seen something in Wyatt's mind and was keeping it to himself. Perhaps Charles had a good reason, but in the end, he was withholding the truth about what was blocking Wyatt's full potential. Much to Wyatt's annoyance and worry. "Whatever. I'll figure it out myself, right?" Eve was able to tap into her full potential when she was dying or under intense emotional stress. "Ugh. I'm not exactly eager to put myself through that," Wyatt said, glancing down at the Xavier Institute below. With all his business done and over with, Wyatt had no more reason to stick around the X-Men any longer. They had offered to help train him to gain control over his powers, but Wyatt turned them down. He wanted to figure things out on his own, even if it would take much longer than it would with their guidance. Wyatt deactivated the thrusters beneath his hands and struggled to stabilize himself using only his feet. After a few moments of wobbling in midair, he finally managed to fly without using his hands, albeit shakily. With a victorious grin, Wyatt pulled out his phone and scrolled through a few of his new contacts. Although he hadn't been at the institution for long, Wyatt managed to make several new friends: Kitty, Evan, Kurt, and Rogue. Scott seemed suspicious of him, but he still provided his contact information. Jean had been kind to him at first, but after Charles tried to probe into his mind, her kindness turned into careful caution. Charles, Logan, and Aurora also offered him their numbers in case he ever needed help. They had also offered to give Wyatt a ride back to the city, but he declined. He was excited to see just how fast he could fly through the sky. Dressed in a biker helmet and a black leather suit to hide his identity, Wyatt looked back up to the sky in front of him and grinned. Given that the government and who knows who else might be looking for mutants, he didn't want to risk exposing his identity any more than he already had. For now, his current outfit would conceal his appearance as he flew back home. Slipping his phone into his pocket, Wyatt turned toward the direction of the city and blasted off. At first, he flew at about 80 kilometers per hour, but as he grew more comfortable with flying, he pushed himself and accelerated to 300 kilometers per hour. This is amazing. Wyatt whooped as he sliced through the sky, leaving a reddish-pink trail behind him. 3-star General Thaddeus E. Thunderbolt Ross sat at a desk in the Strategic Operations Command Center of the Pentagon. It was the dead of night, and the only light illuminating the room came from the wall-mounted television. A female reporter was reporting live from the edge of the Southern Polytech campus. Behind her, several dozen students and reporters were trying to catch a glimpse of the chaos unfolding on the university grounds. Rumors continued to swirl about a violent clash between the forces of the U.S. Army and an unknown adversary on the campus of Southern Polytech University earlier today, the reporter stated. Authorities have renewed the long-cold hunt for fugitive government scientist David Bruce Banner. Ross glared at the screen as a photo of Bruce Banner appeared. An angry scowl marred his face as he gripped the phone next to his ear. For God's sake, Sam, the National Guard can't get tents to hurricane zones in time. You're telling me I've got to liaise with part-timers? Standing outside one of the Pentagon conference rooms, 2-star General Samuel Greller frowned as he held his phone to his ear. It's domestic on paper, so the Guard and FBI have to be involved. Hearing this, Ross fumed, FBI. Did the chief see those tapes? Do they think that was a video game? They saw them, nobody's doubting anymore. Greller said wearily. I thought we had our hands full handling those mutants. Now this. What's this world coming to? What's the FBI going to do? Pull out badges. Why don't we get the ATF involved while we're at it? Ross exclaimed. It's just formalities. Use them for intel and then tell them to back off. The chiefs are giving you total authority to run this operation. Make your list of what you need and get back to me. Furious, Ross hung up the phone on Greller. He turned to look at the news just in time to see the reporter interviewing 2 students. Very few outside the military got a first-hand look at their rumored adversary. Sophomores Jack McGee and Kevin Feige were on their way home from a hike and witnessed part of the battle. McGee captured this on his cell phone. Can you describe what you saw? The reporter asked. Ross's eyes narrowed as he stared intently at the flickering television screen, where a grainy video captured the chaos unfolding before him. The hulking figure of the Hulk, Bruce Banner's formidable gamma-powered alter ego, was in the midst of a ferocious battle. With muscles tensed and green skin glistening under the sun, the Hulk unleashed his pent-up rage, effortlessly overpowering the military personnel. Soldiers scrambled to regain control, their tactical formations collapsing as the Hulk smashed through their ranks with unyielding force, sending them flying like ragdolls. Despite their training and equipment, it was clear that they were no match for the might of this unstoppable creature. Dude, it was huge and green. Like how Steve Nash would look standing next to Shaq. McGee said with barely contained excitement. Feige nodded and stepped in front of McGee. Dude, it was so big. It was like this enormous Hulk. The camera then refocused on the reporter. Further searches for the mysterious Hulk were delayed by powerful thunderstorms in the Smoky Mountain National Forest. Ross glared at the television. Seeing those video clips did nothing to lighten his mood, they only reminded him of his failures. With a click, Major Kathleen Katspar entered the room with wide eyes, appearing breathless. "Sir, it's Blonsky," Spar said between gasps. "He's awake." A weathered bench nestled amid the vibrant greenery of New York Central Park held a haphazard pile of books. The collection of books covered a diverse range of subjects, including the intricate principles of chemistry, which explored the building blocks of matter, the dynamic world of biomechanics, delving into the complex mechanics of human movement, the technical rigor of structural engineering, focused on designing safe buildings, and the essential nuances of New York City codes, guiding urban planners and architects alike. With a donut in hand, Wyatt took a bite of his food as he read through another book focused on the creation of the atomic bomb and its workings. Okay, knowing that I can create an atomic bomb with ease is something I don't think I needed to know. Wyatt had a shaky smile and closed the book. Placing it on the pile, he leaned back and stared out at the scene in front of him. Dozens of people were enjoying the beautiful sunny day as they either walked, jogged, walked their dogs, or rode their bikes through the lush park. Wyatt smiled at the peace around him and was about to reach for a different book when a random police officer came into sight. The officer appeared to be on his daily foot patrol and smiled at a few passing citizens. It didn't seem as if he were in search of anyone specifically, but that didn't stop Wyatt from discreetly creating a pair of shades and a baseball hat from inside his backpack. Grabbing his book, he raised it in front of his face and acted naturally. Classic MCU disguise. Wyatt grinned and began reading on New York's building codes and intricacies. To any observer, he would appear as an enthusiastic future architect. When the officer eventually walked past Wyatt, he glanced at the young reality warper with little regard and then moved on. It's nice to see the youth reading a book. Everyone these days is always on those damn phones. The officer muttered as he walked off. With a small sigh, Wyatt took off his sunglasses and relaxed. Ever since he had escaped police custody, he became rather nervous at the sight of any NYPD officer in sight. Luckily, he was able to control himself and act naturally whenever he did come across an officer. For the next 2 hours, Wyatt immersed himself in the book's pages, soaking up its strict guidelines and intricate explanations. When he finally stood up, a loud groan escaped his lips as he stretched his stiff muscles, feeling the tension release. After packing his books into his backpack, Wyatt stepped out of the serene park, feeling the contrast of the bustling city and the serene park around him. The busy streets of New York were alive with the sounds of honking horns, chattering pedestrians, and street vendors calling out their daily specials. He expertly navigated through the throng of people, taking in the sights and sensations of the city that never sleeps with a calm smile. No. I told you to put 50,000 down. Not 10. A middle-aged man dressed in an expensive suit barked at his phone. Like, I'm right outside. Don't you see me? An attractive woman said as she adjusted her earrings. Hell yeah, men. We should totally watch that movie. Did you hear they casted? A teenager spoke excitedly on his phone as he biked past Wyatt. Maybe that officer was onto something. Wyatt muttered as he stopped at a crosswalk, his eyes scanning over several more people on their phones. At the crosswalk, dozens of people waited beside him until the light turned green. Once it did, like a raging river unleashed, everyone from both ends of the street moved forward. Once across, Wyatt ventured onward on foot through the vibrant city until he arrived at a charming pizza shop nestled in the heart of Harlem. Luigi's Pizzeria, with its inviting facade and gleaming window displays, exuded a warm, welcoming charm. As Wyatt stepped inside, the soft chime of a bell tinkled overhead, drawing the attention of a man in his late 40s, whose weathered hands deftly placed a bubbling pizza into the stone oven, the tantalizing aroma of melting cheese and fresh basil filling the air. Behind the counter, a young girl with tousled dark brown hair offered Wyatt a bright, friendly smile. "Wyatt, my young friend. It's been weeks since you last visited. I was starting to worry your business was stolen from me," Luigi laughed. "Come. Sit. I'll prepare your usual." "Come on, Luigi. Do you really think I'll go anywhere else but the best pizza shop in the city?" Wyatt grinned and took a seat on a table near the counter, his gaze falling on the girl behind the counter. "Serena. It's been a minute." Serena perked up and smiled at Wyatt. "It has. I was beginning to think your bad habits finally landed you in jail. That or you finally pissed someone off enough to find yourself sleeping with the fishes." "Technically, I did," Wyatt thought as he nervously chuckled. "Please. As if anyone would do something like that to a face like mine." Wyatt grinned at Serena. Serena blinked and squinted her eyes at Wyatt. She remained silent for several moments. The only noise that could be heard was Luigi singing as he made Wyatt's custom pizza. "Wyatt, are you okay? You're acting differently." Serena asked softly, concern in her eyes. Slipping slightly, Wyatt frowned and readjusted himself on his stool. I've just had a rough couple of days. But everything is fine now." "Really?" Serena hummed in thought and nodded at his response. Grateful for the fact she didn't push the issue, Wyatt leaned on the table and closed his eyes. After the younger Wyatt had been kicked out of his group home, which was undeniably his fault, he had struggled to survive on the streets for the first couple of weeks. He barely had the money to buy himself food, often resorting to stealing from grocery stores and bodegas. When he did have money, Wyatt had always visited Luigi's for a slice of pizza. And why wouldn't he? The Italian men served great-tasting food for a great affordable price. There were even times when Wyatt had been short on cash, but Luigi never let it bother him. He accepted what Wyatt had, and even when he was flat-out broke, the kind man always gave Wyatt free food. Luigi would even talk to Wyatt and offer him advice when he had gone through tough times. The man never judged him. He simply listened and offered help when it was needed. The man's acts of selflessness had impacted Wyatt, but his young, rage-filled mind never truly appreciated it. He did, however, care about the man. More so than he ever did for Sean, his actual past caretaker. Despite himself, the young Wyatt grew to see Luigi as his pseudo-father figure. Now, as a being of two lifetimes, Wyatt would always appreciate the man. Serena, Luigi's 16-year-old daughter, had initially been suspicious of Wyatt. She had seen him as like any other rough, troubled, and untrustworthy hoodlum. To her, Wyatt was just trouble waiting to happen. His past short-tempered attitude did not help the situation. However, over time, she steadily warmed up to him and eventually came to see him as a friend. "Your food is ready, my young friend." Luigi laughed and placed a box of freshly made pizza in front of him. "Serena, grab Wyatt something to drink." Serena rolled her eyes but did as she was told, her expression one of amused resignation. After grabbing a bottle of Coke from the fridge behind her, she placed it down in front of Wyatt and took a seat next to him. She grabbed a slice of his pizza and began to eat as if it was her order. The two chatted and caught up while Luigi continued working on some of his other orders. "So what's in the bag?" "Drugs," Serena asked as she looked over at Wyatt's bag. "Nah, not this week," Wyatt said jokingly. "All you'll find in there are books. Go check if you don't believe me." Serena looked at him disbelievingly and zipped open his book bag. She hummed in surprise as she found several books in his bag. She even went as far as pulling out a book to check its contents. It must be raining cats and dogs out there. Our little Wyatt is reading. Papa, I think he's been replaced with an alien. Luigi laughed and threw some pizza dough into the air with expert ease. Haha. Very funny, Wyatt said dryly. I do read now and then. Does that mean you're thinking about going back to school? Serena asked excitedly. It's not too late. School? Me? Nah. School's for those who need an education to make money. Wyatt smirked and leaned back. If he wanted to, he could transmute Luigi's entire pizza shop into gold and diamonds. Well, duh. That's how it works. Serena looked at Wyatt as if he was stupid, which she assumed he sort of was. She stood up and headed back to the counter. Are you sure you didn't hit your head or something? Wyatt laughed and shook his head. Standing up, he closed his pizza box and walked over to the counter. Pretty sure. But I do have some blanks in my memory here and there, so who knows? Pulling out a thick wad of cash from his pockets, Wyatt didn't bother to count and grabbed several $100s. Consider my tab paid. Oh, and there's a tip in there for you, too. Serena's eyes grew wide at the stack of money. There must have been at least $3,000 worth of hundreds in the bundle. She looked up at Wyatt with worry. Wyatt, be honest with me. Are you actually selling drugs? She whispered and turned back to look at her father. Luigi was too razor-focused on his craft to notice. Where did you get all this money? Easy there, Serena. It's legit. Take it. Wyatt smiled softly and pushed the bills closer to Serena's person. You and your father have been there for me when nobody else was. I owe you this and more. But Wyatt. No buts. Wyatt grinned and dashed to the door. He was careful not to forget his remaining pizza. Thanks for the food. See you next time, Luigi and Serena. Ha. Take care, Wyatt. Be sure to come back sooner next time. Luigi turned back and smiled at Wyatt. Wyatt nodded and quickly left. Not willing to give Serena time to try and return the money he left in her hands. Leaving that much behind was no issue for Wyatt. With all the gold he has been selling to Victor, the shady yet resourceful pawnshop owner, over the past month, he had more money than he knew what to do with. Wyatt, get back here. Serena yelled as she ran out of the shop to watch Wyatt run around the corner of the street. With a satisfied burp, Wyatt discreetly transmuted his greasy pizza box into oxygen. The vibrant city lights of the Harlem streets flickered around him, casting a kaleidoscope of colors onto the asphalt as they illuminated the nightlife around him. Just as Wyatt prepared to soar into the starry sky and make his way home, he was suddenly jolted by a loud boom that reverberated through the alley. The hell? Wyatt muttered, slightly shaken. It didn't take long for another ear-splitting explosion to be heard in the distance. What's going on? Swallowing the lump in his throat, Wyatt listened to the distant screams and sounds of chaos in the distance. He was about to fly off into the air, but he found that his legs wouldn't move. They were frozen. With great power comes great responsibility. No, not now. Wyatt cursed as one of the most iconic lines in history echoed through his mind. It didn't help that the very same person to have said those words was very real. With a frustrated grunt, Wyatt spun on his heel and ran towards the sounds of chaos and terror. It didn't take him long to reach the epicenter of all the chaos and destruction that was occurring. Turning to the right, Wyatt's eyes widened at the sight of a large, gray beast surrounded by fire and destruction. The beast towered above everyone, its imposing figure sculpted by bulging muscles rippling beneath its leathery skin. Sharp, jagged bone protrusions jutted from its massive frame, giving it an even more fearsome appearance. A deep, rumbling laugh, both amused and menacing, echoed from its terrifying visage as it lifted an empty car and hurled it across the street with utter ease. The vehicle sailed across the air in a ball of fire, narrowly missing a group of panicked people who sprinted away in sheer terror. The Abomination. Wyatt whispered as he watched Emil Blonsky, now the Abomination, laugh as he destroyed everything around him. With a laugh, the Abomination picked up another car and launched it down the street directly at a running woman. She was completely unaware of her incoming doom. Before he knew it, Wyatt's body moved. At the last moment, Wyatt's arm shot out with a bright glow that engulfed the vehicle, transforming the car that would have crushed the woman into water. The water harmlessly splashed over her, leaving her soaked but unharmed. The woman blinked in confusion but quickly continued to run away. "What am I doing?" Wyatt thought, his extended arms shaking before him. "I can create anything, but I'm not physically strong. I'm not fast, and my body is as durable as a normal human. So why am I putting myself in danger? Come on." Abomination roared and kicked a flaming car down the street. In its path, an injured man who was limping away screamed. A flash of red-pink energy exploded from under Wyatt, launching him into the sky. Waving his hand, he created a glowing wall construct in front of the Mun, stopping the flaming car from crushing him. The Mun blinked and turned to look up just in time to be blinded by a flash of light in the air. This flash of light stole the attention of those running away, making them pause in their rush to get away. Flying in midair above the street, Wyatt was now covered in a hastily constructed costume. The suit that was over his form was a combination of Mark Grayson's Invincible suit and Adam Eve's uniform. A red motorcycle helmet rested over his head, concealing his identity. The materials used for the suit included a mix of rigid and elastic fabrics, such as carbon fiber and graphene, designed to absorb the impact of any blows he might receive. Although the costume was not well thought out and rushed in its creation, it would serve its purpose. Am I really doing this? It's not too late to fly away. I can just leave the Abomination for Hulk to handle. Wyatt thought, but at the sight of all the unconscious people sprawled nearby the Abomination, he knew he couldn't fly away and leave them behind. Wyatt's mind flashed to Serena and Luigi. Their restaurant and home were only 2 blocks away. If Abomination's rampage led him to their location and resulted in them getting hurt or worse, Wyatt wouldn't be able to look himself in the mirror for allowing that to happen. No, I can't. Not when I have the power to give everyone time to get to safety. At least until the big guy gets here. Hey, ugly. I suggest you put on some pants. And a mask while you're at it. Geez, you have the face only a mother could love. Wyatt quipped as he flew closer to the Abomination. He was thankful for his helmet. Otherwise, his terrified expression would be evident for all to see. Who are you? Abomination said with a glare before grinning. It doesn't matter. You'll make do until he gets here. Hey, I'm not your appetizer, you overgrown anglerfish. Wyatt yelled and flew higher, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. I'll give you one chance, surrender, and no one has to get hurt. Abomination laughed and grabbed a nearby car. With little difficulty, he threw it at Wyatt as if it were a softball. Okay, looks like we're doing this, Wyatt said and took a deep breath to calm his nerves. With fear gripping his heart, he flew straight at the car. When Wyatt Wilkins finally accepted that he was now 2 different people of 2 different minds merged into one singular body and that he had transmigrated into an alternate version of the MCU with Adam Eve's powers, he never considered becoming a hero. No, Wyatt planned to use his powers to live a luxurious and peaceful life. He intended to leave all the hero work in saving the Earth to the Avengers, X-Men, and whoever else wanted to put on a colorful supersuit. However, when he found himself directly facing life and death, Wyatt couldn't look away and allow anyone around him to suffer. Not when he knew he had the power to do something. With great power comes great responsibility. The words of Benjamin Parker, spoken to Peter Parker, echoed in Wyatt's mind. This single line had become iconic in his previous life. Those words had pushed one of fiction's greatest heroes to do what was right, no matter the sacrifice. No matter what it took. Now, confronted with the danger of Emil Blonsky, who had transformed into the gamma-powered abomination, Wyatt couldn't simply fly away and leave people to die or get hurt. Not when he had the power to slow the gamma-powered beast until the Hulk arrived to stop him. I regret all my life choices. Wyatt grunted and flew over the incoming car the abomination launched at him. With great concentration, Wyatt held out a hand and created a large spiked ball beside him. The abomination blinked in surprise as a glowing construct inexplicably appeared in the air. Ha! Wyatt yelled and shot his spiked ball at the gamma beast. The abomination chose not to move and stood still. He was reveling in his new power. After being injected with a concentrated dose of Bruce Banner's blood. With such a power now coursing through his veins, he felt invincible. And why shouldn't he? His new body was impervious to bullets and strong enough to launch cars and buses through the air with incredible ease. So, when he spotted a large, comical, glowing ball covered in spikes, he stood his ground with a confident grin. His newfound strength intoxicated him. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed down the street. The abomination blinked, finding himself 5 feet away from where he had been standing. A dull pain flared across his chest as the embers of the construct vanished around him. Did that joke of an attack actually hurt me? Abomination thought. Holy shit. Did that actually push him back? Wyatt wondered. Growling, the abomination reached beside him and ripped a car door from a burning vehicle and hurled it like a frisbee across the street. Wyatt quickly snapped out of his shock and leaned back, narrowly avoiding the high-speed projectile. He flew backward, scanning the street for any remaining civilians. He needed to buy time for them to escape as far as possible. Nice throw, if you were aiming for that wall, Wyatt said, landing on the ground. He was still getting used to using his constructs mid-flight and barely managed to throw the spike ball without losing his balance. He thanked Lady Luck under his breath for preventing him from crashing to the ground and possibly getting squashed. So, are you some sort of escaped science experiment? Or were you always that ugly? Annoying bug. Abomination roared and rushed Wyatt. Small red-pink discs appeared under Wyatt's feet, lifting him over the ground. Concentrating, Wyatt used the discs to slide over the pavement and away from the abomination's incoming fist. The street shook, and the asphalt cracked from the force of the powerful earth-shattering punch. One hit from that, and I'm toast, Wyatt said. It was then that he heard a faint whimper. Looking to the side, he saw a bleeding woman trapped within a half-crushed vehicle, a result of the abomination's rampage. Beside her was the remains of a Mun. Or at least, the shadow of a Mun. His body was left unrecognizable due to the car's crumbled metal frame crushing his flesh. Blood poured down the ruined vehicle and pooled onto the ground. Mike, God, no. The woman cried as she reached for her dead husband. No, no, no. Die. Wyatt was jolted back to the fight as Abomination quickly closed the distance despite his large size. Acting quickly, Wyatt raised his hands and hastily created a barrier over him just as Abomination's fists crashed down with incredible force. Due to their hasty construction, Wyatt's constructs ended up thin and weak. In the end, they buckled under the full blowback of the attack, sending Wyatt rolling back. Darn it. Wyatt grunted as he pushed himself up. The asphalt under his hands shook as Abomination jumped into the air, fully intent on crushing him underfoot. A rope of energy formed around Wyatt's torso and yanked him forward. He grimaced as his body crashed along the ground of the pavement. As he pushed himself up, he was thankful for his quick thinking when he watched a large chunk of the street shatter under the Abomination's heavy weight and strength. Stop running and fight. Abomination growled, spittle flying. Seeing the level of destruction the Abomination was able to produce with such ease caused Wyatt's breathing to quicken. He had been able to maintain his calm only thanks to the humorous quips and witty commentary he had been making from the start of the confrontation. A weak attempt of Wyatt imitating one of his heroes, Spider-Man. But now that he finally felt the first sting of pain from it all, the reality of his situation finally pressed down on him. "What am I doing? I can't do this," Wyatt whispered and turned to look down at his shaking arms and legs. "What was I thinking? What, I land one lucky hit, and I'm suddenly able to go toe-to-toe with someone of his power. Stupid." The abomination roared and turned to a turned-over bus several feet away from him. Inside the bus were several unconscious people, having been knocked out when the abomination initially appeared and sent the bus flying with a kick. With a heave, he lifted the bus and tossed it in the air at Wyatt. From within the airborne bus, a young boy opened his eyes, his consciousness returning to him. He only had a split second to realize he was sailing through the air, momentarily free of gravity. The boy's face twisted from confusion to terror as his world spun out of control. Wyatt stood frozen, his eyes following the bus as if in slow motion. The bodies inside were now clear, thanks to the transport vehicle spinning in the air. A fact unknown to Wyatt himself was that his brain was capable of processing information at speeds unthinkable to normal humans. His brain processing speed was what allowed him to change millions upon millions of molecules and atoms within a fraction of a second. As such, his brain's processing speed was comparable to a supercomputer. This processing speed was what allowed him to see every single individual within the flying bus alongside his entire environment moving in slow motion. Still, his incredible processing speed didn't transfer over to his movement or reaction speed. But for Wyatt, that didn't matter. "Stop it. Stop being afraid. Stop hesitating. Just ACT," Wyatt thought and moved like a man possessed. Dashing forward, Wyatt swung his right arm to the side and transformed the bus into an explosion of bubbles. In a snap, Wyatt raised his left hand, and a large glowing construct in the shape of a hand appeared, catching all the passengers. With a pulling motion, Wyatt's hand construct closed into itself and became a rolling roller coaster. In each cart sat a passenger, each one strapped safely to their seat as they flew over the street and away from the battle. As the roller coaster flew past Wyatt, the young boy stared at the visage of his colorful suit with wide, awed eyes. Despite the inexplicable creation of a roller coaster, Abomination moved toward Wyatt with a furious roar. Pulling an arm back, he was about to punch Wyatt when, all of a sudden, he felt heavy. It was as if the very air around him was slowing him down. "I increased the density in the air," Wyatt struggled to say as he clenched a hand at Abomination. From behind his helmet, Wyatt's face was covered in sweat as he turned his attention away from the struggling beast and looked down at the ground under the Abomination's feet. "I can't hold this for long, but it should give me enough time to finish my next move. You bug. I'll squash you." Abomination was suddenly cut off as the air around him returned to normal. Before the beast could move, the ground under him crumbled away to reveal a bottomless pit. Like a heavy rock, the Abomination dropped down at incredible speeds. As he fell into the depths below, he unleashed a roar that echoed away. Feeling exhausted, Wyatt fell to a knee, his body covered in sweat and out of breath. He looked around the chaos and forced himself up. As he stood up, he stumbled forward but quickly caught himself. After taking a calming breath, he released a large wave of energy out around him, extinguishing the roaring fires nearby. Wyatt turned to the woman from earlier and reached her side. In a flash, the top half of the vehicle that had once trapped her and crushed her husband vanished, leaving her free. The woman gasped in relief as the crushing weight lifted off her body, but she remained focused on her deceased husband. Wyatt frowned sadly and laid a blanket over his mangled corpse. "We have to go, ma'am. It won't take that monster too long to come back," Wyatt said softly. But the woman was beyond words. She was lost in her grief. "What the hell? Where did that thing go?" Wyatt turned to see several officers and military personnel arrive, their weapons drawn, in search of the Abomination. A few of them stared down at the deep pit incredulously. "Hey, I need help," Wyatt called out, gaining their attention. The officers and military quickly reached his position and saw the tragic sight of the woman's husband. But at the sight of Wyatt's brightly colored suit, they stopped and stared at him in suspicion. "Quick! Take her and get as far away as you can. I didn't have the energy to seal the hole, so it won't take the abomination long to climb back up." Wyatt yelled. "Who are you? Where's that creature?" One of the officers asked as he raised his weapon at Wyatt. His odd costume made them suspicious of him. Before Wyatt could answer, the echo of a roar could be heard from a large pit in the middle of the road, scaring a few officers and military personnel. "Now's not the time." From the sound of his yell, "He'll be back in 2 or 3 minutes at the most. We have to move." Wyatt yelled at the officers and military with what he hoped was a commanding voice. To prove his might, Wyatt released a small wave of energy down the street, clearing a path for the officers to take the grieving woman and corpse through. "Did I stutter? Go." "All right. Let's get her out of here. Scott, Jenkins, and Young, take a look and check to see if we have any more injured in the area. Everyone else, let's get them out of here," one of the military personnel said. Wyatt let out a heavy sigh as he stood amidst the chaos, observing the officers and military personnel as they quickly and methodically combed through the wreckage. Tired but not one to stand around and do nothing, Wyatt began to help, carefully clearing away the jagged pieces of debris with his powers. With deft but shaky movements, he conjured wheelchairs and stretchers for the injured who struggled to stand or move. His hands worked swiftly, creating any essential items that were needed to aid the wounded. As Wyatt continued to help, he began to feel his energy continually decrease with each use of his powers. He had never used his powers at such a large scale and in such rapid succession. If it weren't for the looming presence of the abomination, he would have collapsed to his knees. While Wyatt was helping 2 officers place an unconscious man onto a stretcher, a roar and a crash echoed behind them. Wyatt and the officers all turned to see an enraged abomination. His breathing was quick and ragged, and his burning eyes were glaring holes into Wyatt's very being. The beast didn't seem to appreciate the 400-foot fall Wyatt had put him through. "Damn it. He got back up quicker than I thought," Wyatt muttered tiredly and stood up straight. He turned to the officers, who lifted an unconscious man onto a stretcher. "Go. I'll buy you all some time." The officers nodded and were about to move when one of the youngest among them hesitated. What's your name?" Wyatt paused and turned to the young officer. He stayed silent a few moments, but at the incoming heavy steps, he answered quickly. "I'm Atomic," Wyatt said, and barely managed to fly at the abomination. "General, you should hear this." High above the streets of New York, a military helicopter buzzed through the night sky. Inside the cramped cabin, the tension was palpable. One of the personnel, clad in tactical gear, turned sharply in his seat, extending a phone toward Ross with a serious expression. General Thunderbolt Ross hesitated for a moment, casting a glance at his daughter, Betty Ross. Beside her, Bruce Banner sat handcuffed. Ross rose from his seat, the helicopter's vibrations rattling his bones, and reached out to take the phone. "The Hulk is in the street. I repeat, the Hulk is in the street." Ross heard from the other end of the phone. The general turned and gave Bruce a confused look before answering. "That's impossible. You get a hold of yourself, young man. You get it together. What is your position?" Ross asked. Down below, racing through the streets of Harlem, a military vehicle with both police officers and army soldiers chased after Abomination and Atomic as they battled through the streets. The young soldier, Andrew, yelled over the radio. 121st Street, heading north on Broadway. Frowning, Ross turned to the pilot. "Turn us around." The pilot nodded and tilted his controls, causing the helicopter to lean sharply to the side as they changed course to Harlem. Bruce felt the helicopter shift and gave Betty a confused look. "We're going back." "Why are we going back?" "Damn it. Give me eyes down there. Ross commanded and leaned close to the small monitor on the helicopter. Yes, sir. Andrew said as their vehicle made a sharp turn into a chaotic street, slamming the side of their vehicle into an oncoming taxi. Andrew adjusted the camera on his helmet to focus on the blooms of fire and destruction down the road. Further up the street, Andrew's camera captured the chaotic back-and-forth battle between Atomic and the Abomination. Atomic used his flight and glowing constructs to avoid and distract the gamma-powered beast while Abomination roared in rage as he tried to crush his tricky opponent. No. Bruce shot to his feet and moved to the monitors, quickly followed by Betty and the two soldiers ordered to watch over them. Bruce's eyes grew wide in horror as he watched Abomination destroy everything around him in his pursuit to kill Atomic. With a glare, Bruce turned to Ross. One of yours. Oh, my God. What have you done? Betty said, horrified at what her father had done. Everyone in the helicopter refocused on the monitor and watched as Atomic tried his best to slow down or distract Abomination, but his movements were slow and choppy. The young hero's constructs were becoming smaller and smaller due to his exhaustion, barely larger than a basketball. The police in the distance did their best to shoot Abomination to aid Atomic, but their bullets remained useless against his tough skin. Who's that? The one in the colorful suit. Betty asked. Whoever it is, he won't be enough to stop him, Bruce muttered, his eyes growing sharp. Tell them to bring everything they've got and head for Harlem, Ross said into his radio with resignation. Behind him, Bruce took a deep breath and nodded to himself. It has to be me. You have to take me back there. Bruce turned to Ross and Betty. What are you saying? You think you can control it? Betty asked. No, not control it, but, I don't know, maybe aim it, Bruce said. And what if you can't? Ross turned to Bruce. We don't need two of you and whoever that is down there destroying the city. Bruce took a deep breath and gave Ross a look. We made this thing. All of us. Please. Ross thought carefully about the situation. In his last confrontation with the Hulk, nothing he did had managed to stop the creature. Not his extensive plans. Not the millions of dollars worth of military weapons or strategic tactics. Nothing worked. Nothing he did made a difference. Ross realized that using that same approach against the Abomination would likely lead to more destruction in the city and increase civilian casualties. Despite his reservations, Ross understood that the Hulk was most likely their best chance at defeating who was once Emil Blonsky. Land us near it. No. Wait. Keep us high. Open the back door. Ross said. Bruce nodded thankfully at his longtime enemy. Bruce, stop. Stop. What are you doing? Think about this. You don't even know if you'll change. You don't have to do this. Please, this is insane. Betty said as she followed Bruce toward the back of the helicopter, her eyes tight with worry over his safety as the city down below offered her no peace. Betty, I've got to try. I'm sorry. Bruce said sincerely and gave Betty a passionate kiss. As his lips left hers, he fell back and fell downward toward the streets of Harlem. As Bruce fell, he closed his eyes and finally, for the first time in his life, he accepted the change. Unfortunately, what he always vehemently rejected didn't appear at his moment of greatest need. He opened his eyes with regret and cursed. Oh, crap. Bruce said as his body crashed into the asphalt with a thunderous crack. Get her in here. Ross yelled as one of his men brought Betty back into the helicopter, where she quickly moved to a side window to look down at where Bruce had crashed. Betty waited for what felt like forever. Her heart threatened to beat out of her chest as she waited for a sign of movement. Anything that would tell her that Bruce was alive. From below the cracks and rubble of the asphalt, a large green fist exploded. Atomic's breaths came out in quick, sharp, frantic bursts as he struggled to catch his breath. Every action he made felt as if his entire body were waddling through heavy sand. The helmet over his head, intended to conceal his identity, bore a deep crack in the visor, exposing a sliver of his left eye and face. Usually, such damage would have been a quick and easy fix thanks to his powers. But Atomic was far too tired and drained to spare that energy. It was taking everything he had to simply stand on his feet or even fly. However, that didn't mean he was immobile. Under Atomic's feet, a glowing disc helped him hover over the ground. Using this, he skated all around the street with swift and succinct movements that helped him avoid the abomination's attacks. A loud crack rumbled down the street from another failed attack, causing the abomination to snarl. The gamma-powered man's large arm shot forward and grabbed a light pole. With a wide swing, Abomination swung the pole to try to batter Atomic away. The air crackled with tension as Atomic, despite feeling the weight of exhaustion in his bones, narrowly dodged the brutal swing, barely avoiding what could have been a deadly blow. Drawing on his fading energy, Atomic focused the embers of his power. With a flick of his wrist, he erected several sharp adamantium spikes from the concrete beneath the abomination. The razor-sharp spikes erupted violently from below, piercing upward and striking into the abomination's massive form, tearing through his flesh and eliciting a roar of pain and fury from the gamma-powered behemoth. Enough games. Abomination roared and lifted a leg. With all his might, he brought it down to the ground. The street shuddered violently as a wave of destruction surged forth, causing the asphalt to ripple and crack like a broken mirror. Jagged pieces of debris burst violently into the air, kicking up dust into the sky. The sound of shattering concrete filled the streets, creating a cacophony of chaos that reverberated through the surrounding buildings. In his tired state, Atomic was unable to dodge or block one of the fast-flying pieces of debris. The chunk of stone struck him in the stomach, and his loud yell of agony filled the street. Not able to withstand the pain, he crumbled to the floor with his hands holding his bruising stomach. Before Atomic could try to stand, the abomination appeared over him and grabbed him. Atomic's eyes widened as he felt his torso slowly begin to compress, exasperating his injured stomach. "Ah!" He screamed in pain. "Any last words, you bug?" Abomination growled, ready to crush Atomic into paste. A pained wheeze was all Atomic could muster to say as he desperately struggled to pry away the Abomination's large fingers. Abomination grinned at the sight of Atomic's agony and slowly increased his grip on the young man. The beast of a man blinked as a flash of light erupted from around Atomic's chest and quickly found that he was now struggling to close his grip any further. This action was Atomic's final act of desperation. Under the Abomination's grip, Atomic had transformed the upper body section of his tattered suit into a layer of thick adamantium, encasing his vital organs in a protective layer. "If I survive this, I owe Logan a beer," Atomic thought as he watched Abomination's face contort into a rage as he continued to try to crush him under his powerful grip. Much to Atomic's horror, he felt the adamantium protecting him begin to wane under the Abomination's strength. Stop. Atomic managed to wheeze as he racked his brain for a solution. The Abomination chuckled darkly and ignored Atomic's plea for mercy. As he felt the adamantium begin to bend into his ribs, a solution appeared in Atomic's mind. Transform the oxygen in his lungs into acid. The idea was simple and easy. It wouldn't even take that much energy for Atomic to execute. But if he truly managed to switch the oxygen in the Abomination's lungs into corrosive acid, he might irrevocably end the man's life. There was no assurance that his gamma mutation could mend and heal the charred and melted organs from the acid. Atomic felt an unsettling turmoil churn within him as he wrestled with the possibility of killing the man. He had never envisioned himself falling into such a situation where he would have to make the choice of ending another's life. In the end, what choice did Atomic truly have? It was either his life or the Abomination's. A cruel individual who laughed at the sight of death and destruction. "I don't want to die," Atomic thought. "I'm sorry." Closing his eyes, Atomic readied himself to do what was needed when, all of a sudden, a loud roar echoed down the street. Abomination paused, his eyes narrowing in realization as he turned to face the distant figure of the Hulk. The air crackled with tension, and for a moment, Atomic, despite his dangerous situation, found himself captivated by the sight of one of Marvel's most legendary icons. The Hulk, towering and imposing, effortlessly tore off the remnants of a tattered shirt that hung from his muscular frame, revealing gleaming green skin. The sheer power radiating from the Hulk was palpable and seemingly limitless. So strong. Atomic thought. Hulk. Abomination said with glee and threw Atomic aside. No longer interested in crushing the costumed young hero into paste. He had a new opponent to test his power on. Atomic was, unfortunately, still encased in adamantium, making him much heavier than usual. He was unable to free himself in time to avoid falling headfirst onto the asphalt. With his world spinning around him, he slowly fell unconscious. "Is that all you got?" Abomination sneered as he glared at Hulk. Hulk growled as he pulled his arm back, preparing to unleash another punch onto the Abomination's face. But before he could land the blow, Abomination pulled his leg back and kicked Hulk through the air and into an apartment building with incredible power. Smirking at his power, Abomination rose and sprinted after Hulk. With a mighty leap, he scaled the apartment building and peered out through the large hole made by Hulk's body. One of the apartment's residents blinked in shock at the sudden hole that tore through her living room. Walking towards it, she turned her head and watched as the Abomination peeked inside with a cruel grin. The woman released a frightened scream and quickly ran away. Hearing the woman's scream, Abomination chuckled in amusement. Suddenly, a hail of bullets rained down on Abomination's back, causing him to growl in irritation. He turned around to see a military helicopter firing its minigun. "Ross!" The Abomination growled at the sight of the Mun in the helicopter. Flexing his powerful muscles, Abomination effortlessly scaled the side of the apartment building, each powerful movement bringing him closer to the rooftop. As he reached the top and surveyed the cityscape below, a helicopter thumped through the air, its searchlight casting a stark beam that illuminated his path. A wicked smile spread across Abomination's face as he took off running across the rooftops, the whirring blades overhead barely drowning out the deafening roar of the minigun that spat a relentless stream of bullets in his wake, tearing through the air and rooftops with a furious crackle. A few blocks away, Atomic lay unconscious on the pavement, his body sprawled at an awkward angle. Around him, a group of officers and military personnel stood in a tense silence. Apprehension etched on their faces. They exchanged urgent whispers while keeping a watchful eye on the fallen young hero. To the sides, several brave yet cautious New Yorkers peered from alleyways and doorways, their expressions a mix of curiosity and fear as they had witnessed chaos that had destroyed a long stretch of Harlem. Even now, the distant sounds of havoc reverberate through the streets from the far-off confrontation. "It's like he's encased in steel," Officer Thomas said as he tried to remove Atomic's adamantium shell costume. "I'm not sure if he can breathe." "Do you think he's a mutant? I mean, how else was he able to do everything he did?" Private Lowry asked. "It doesn't matter what he is. He saved several lives today," Lieutenant Dunn said in a heavy voice. He moved to stand next to Atomic and peered down into the crack of his visor. "Is he a kid?" Dunn thought with a growing horror and incredulity. At that moment, Atomic's eyelids fluttered open, the world coming into focus as a low groan escaped his lips. As he regained his focus, a barrage of faces hovered above him, each person displaying a mix of emotions. Some wore expressions of deep gratitude, their eyes shining with relief. In contrast, a few others held a cautious distance, brows furrowed in concern. A hint of fear flickered in a few gazes, and confusion reigned across the collective watching crowd as they struggled to comprehend the situation unfolding before them. "Did I win?" Atomic joked, trying to ease those around him. No," Lowry said. "That guy you fought is now fighting the Hulk. It looks like the green one is on our side this time." "I see." Atomic nodded and tried to sit up but paused when he felt the weight from the thick adamantium layer of his suit pressing down on him. In a flash of light, he reverted his costume back to its original materials and fixed his visor. Despite how exhausted he felt, he pushed himself to his feet, which ended up being a mistake as he felt his world spin. "Here, I got you, son," Dunn said as he helped steady Atomic before he could fall. A thunderous crash reverberated through the city, causing heads to turn in alarm. As the flashes of sparks illuminated the night, a military helicopter, emblazoned with the insignia of Ross's airborne division, tore through a massive billboard, its rotor still spinning erratically as it crash-landed. The metallic creak of the helicopter echoed through the night as its pilots struggled to stabilize the aircraft. Below the helicopter, the colossal figures of the Abomination and the Hulk clung fiercely to the landing skids, their powerful forms silhouetted against the bright lights of the city skyline. "Holy shit," Thomas muttered as a far-off explosion could be seen. The helicopter had made landfall. "Are they?" "I have to go," Atomic said and pushed himself away from Dunn's helping hands. But as he tried to step forward, he fell to a knee. "Crap. I can barely stand. Much less fight. I should just let Hulk finish things off. He'll win just like in the movie, right?" Atomic thought. "Listen, son, you've done enough. You can't even stand. Much less fight," Dunn said as he kneeled beside Atomic. "I'll radio in for backup. Get us some more boots. We'll take down that son of a gun." Atomic took a deep breath and willed himself to draw more of his power. Placing his arms at his sides, he hovered over the ground. "No, it's okay. If I can't stand, then I'll fly." Ignoring his shaking limbs and Dunn's words, Atomic shot up into the night sky. "You don't deserve this power. Now watch her die." Abomination sneered, his voice dripping with malice. With a fierce, deliberate motion, he raised his massive arm and plunged the sharp spike protruding from his elbow deep into the Hulk's chest. A guttural roar of pain erupted from the Hulk as he struggled to push Abomination's arm away, but his opponent's strength held him firmly in place against the stone wall he was pressed up against. Hulk's teeth ground together as he fought against the agony surging through him, feeling the bone piercing deeper into his flesh with each agonizing second. Despite the pain, Hulk's green eyes flickered toward the wreckage of the nearby helicopter, where Betty was trapped, her face pale with fear as she watched the fight from the wreckage. The ground below the helicopter was alive with sparks from the broken rotor blades spinning lazily. Flowing underneath the aircraft, a trail of fuel leaked onto the ground, growing closer and closer to the falling sparks. Within moments, flames exploded into life as a spark made contact with the fuel. A burst of fire erupted and followed the trail of fuel leading to the helicopter's fuel tanks. At the realization of Betty's life hanging in the balance, the Hulk's fury ignited like wildfire, surging through him and amplifying his already immense power. His eyes glowed brightly as he released a low growl. Using his new burst of power, Hulk grasped the Abomination's wrists and began to slowly overpower him with a low growl. It didn't take long for the Hulk to steadily begin to force the Abomination back, inch by arduous inch. Abomination's eyes widened in disbelief as he felt Hulk's sudden surge of strength eclipse his own. Desperate to regain control, Abomination tried to push back, but it quickly became clear that he was no longer a match for Hulk's growing power. With a rage-fueled roar, Hulk barreled forward, driving his head into Abomination's chest with a force that left his foe gasping for air. Seizing the moment, Hulk dashed forward and gripped Abomination by the spiky protrusions lining his back. With a mighty thrust, he drove the Abomination headfirst into the wall with a thunderous crash. With his opponent out for the moment, Hulk turned sharply, his eyes widened in alarm at the sight of flames licking hungrily toward the helicopter. Time seemed to slow as the fiery tendrils ominously approached the aircraft's vulnerable fuel tanks. Turning around, Hulk was about to rush forward just as the flames threatened to engulf the helicopter when a brilliant wave of reddish-pink energy surged across the ground, dissipating the fire as if it had never existed. Stunned, Hulk blinked in disbelief at the sight of Atomic, who landed unsteadily in front of the helicopter. "Behind you, big guy." Atomic yelled and jumped forward, his arms moving forward. The large concrete post that would have slammed into the Hulk was quickly transmuted into water, splashing the large green man harmlessly. Abomination blinked in confusion and spun to Atomic with fury. "You!" Abomination growled. "Yeah, it's me," Atomic said and fell to a knee. "I suggest you duck." Abomination blinked, but before he could react, a powerful blow from Hulk sent him sprawling backward, the impact reverberating through the air. Seizing the moment, Hulk moved in and unleashed a relentless barrage of punches, each strike landing with bone-crushing force against the Abomination's formidable frame. With a growl of frustration, Abomination tried to break free from the relentless assault but ultimately succumbed to the Hulk's relentless attacks. With a grunt, a bloodied Abomination dropped to a knee on the cracked pavement. Towering above him, Hulk glared down with a fierce intensity, his muscles coiled and ready for the next attack. "Hulk smash!" he roared, a thunderous declaration of his fury, as he raised both arms high above his head. Then, with a ferocious cry, he brought his fists crashing down onto Abomination's back and head, the sheer force of the blow echoing in the surrounding chaos as a wave of dust flew around them. The entirety of Harlem shook as the Hulk's might could be felt amongst its inhabitants as he once again channeled all his rage into delivering another devastating strike. As Abomination's massive form thundered into the ground, the surrounding plaza trembled violently, fissures spidering out across the pavement from the epicenter of impact. Like a marionette with its strings severed, Abomination's hulking body went slack after the second twin hammer fist. With his triumph undeniably secured, Hulk planted his foot triumphantly atop the defeated Abomination and unleashed a primal roar that resonated through the air, shaking the already fractured pillars and nearby structures. Breathing heavily, Hulk turned his gaze toward Ross, who stood outside the helicopter beside Betty. With a low growl, Hulk reached down into the massive crater and pulled out the Abomination's motionless form. He then tossed the Abomination toward Ross, who looked down at Blonsky's unconscious body. Atomic breathed heavily and held out his arms. Tendrils of shimmering energy coiled around Abomination, compelling the massive creature into a kneeling position. As Abomination settled onto the ground, the concrete beneath him began to tremble and shift, morphing into a series of intricate chains and heavy locks made from adamantium. These formidable restraints, linked together with a metallic clink, wrapped securely around the slumbering beast, ensuring that he would remain confined and unable to break free from his enforced captivity. "Here, don't lose them," Atomic said tiredly, tossing the keys to Abomination's restraints to Ross's feet. Ross frowned and glanced down at the keys while Betty approached the Hulk. Atomic observed them sharing a moment when suddenly, a bright spotlight from a news helicopter illuminated both of them from above. Hulk sighed and was about to run away but stopped to look at Atomic. Much to Atomic's surprise, Hulk nodded at him. A small sign of respect from the powerful man. Atomic, unsure of what to say, nodded back. He then watched as Hulk jumped away and disappeared into the city with a news helicopter following behind him. "You were the one fighting Blonsky," Ross said to Atomic after losing sight of the Hulk. He then turned to his daughter, who was staring in the direction where the Hulk had last been seen. "Who are you?" "Atomic," Atomic answered carefully. He looked around at the crowd held back by the police and military. Their phones were pointed in his direction, recording and taking pictures. Ross frowned and glanced at the crowd. Normally, he would have demanded that Atomic be brought in for questioning. Still, after the events of that day and considering his daughter's current state and the presence of numerous onlookers, Ross felt far too exhausted to do so. Nevertheless, this didn't mean he was finished with the individual who called himself Atomic. But before Ross could speak, Atomic rose over the ground. "Make sure you keep him under lock and key, General," Atomic said in his most serious voice. "Those chains are made out of one of the strongest materials in the world. If he escapes, it'll be on you." Atomic didn't allow Ross to reply and shot up into the sky, leaving behind a trail of red and pink. "That's what I get for trying to look cool," Atomic said as he leaned against a brick wall within an alleyway on the outskirts of Brooklyn. Grimacing, He attempted to take a step forward but found that his legs felt as though they weighed several tons. His vision was beginning to blur and darkness was closing in on the edges of his vision. He tried to remove his helmet with his hands since he lacked the energy to dissolve it, but Atomic discovered that his fingers were uncooperative. "Come on, don't pass out," Atomic muttered weakly. Atomic had never pushed his powers as far as he did today. He had exceeded every limit he thought he had in ways he never imagined possible. It was an eye-opening experience, transitioning from using his abilities for everyday tasks to facing a gamma-powered adversary capable of destroying an entire city block with ease. It had never been clearer to Atomic that his mind, body, and stamina were severely lacking in strength. If it weren't for Hulk's timely appearance, he would have most likely died. But if my powers are exactly like Adam Eve's, there's a good chance I would have just come back to life. Atomic thought. Now on his knees. Still, I would rather not test that aspect of my power and find out I can't revive myself. It's too risky. Damn it. With the last bits of adrenaline finally leaving his system, Atomic collapsed onto the ground, too tired to move another muscle. Slowly, his eyes began to close and he finally fell prey to his exhaustion. Where am I?" Wyatt said as he cautiously looked around his environment. Wyatt found himself seemingly suspended in the vast expanse of space. Vibrant galaxies swirled in hues of deep crimson and shimmering gold while clusters of stars twinkled like scattered diamonds against the velvet backdrop of the cosmos. Every so often, a shooting star would streak across the void, leaving a luminous trail that danced before fading into the distance. What bewildered Wyatt further was the sheer absence of sensations that one would expect in such an environment. There was no biting cold to chill his skin, nor the desperate need to inhale air in a vacuum that would typically suffocate a mortal being. Instead, Wyatt felt an odd sense of peace enveloping him, as if the universe itself cradled him gently, allowing him to drift weightlessly amidst the celestial wonders. This is trippy. Did I die? Again? Is this heaven? Or the other place? Wyatt muttered nervously as he continued to float in the empty vacuum of space. Not entirely sure of how much time has passed. Your performance was lacking. A booming, powerful voice erupted behind Wyatt, reverberating through the stillness of space. With a startled yelp, he quickly spun around, his heart racing at the sight before him. Towering over him was a colossal figure, its imposing presence casting an ethereal glow. The being's bright, luminous white eyes seemed to pierce through the darkness, filled with an intense gaze that held centuries of wisdom. Its form appeared to be composed entirely of pure, swirling energy, crackling with an otherworldly light that shifted and danced like a living nebula. The figure's expression bore the weight of stoicism, a serene calmness that suggested an ancient power and an unwavering resolve, leaving Wyatt both awed and intimidated in its presence. "You must grow stronger, Wyatt," the powerful being said. "If you fail to do so, then everyone's efforts would have been in vain. Her efforts would have been in vain." What? Hold on. Who or what are you? Where am I? And what do you mean by everyone's efforts would have been in vain? Make sense, damn it. Wyatt yelled, ignoring the primal fear that was coursing through his body as he raised his voice to a being that could probably erase him from existence with ease. "Grow stronger, and perhaps we'll meet again," the being said and snapped its fingers. Wyatt screamed as he was sent hurling through the endless space. Wyatt woke up with a gasp, his head aching in agony. He turned up to see an angry old Chinese woman swinging a broom at him whilst yelling in Mandarin. Her Mandarin quickly changed to English as she saw him finally awake and moving. "How many times do I have to tell you weirdos not to sleep behind my restaurant? Get out! Get out!" the woman yelled. Another whack of her broom followed each word. "Geez. Lady, all right. I'm going. I'm going." Wyatt stood up and covered his head with his arms to defend himself from the woman's attacks. As he walked, he finally noticed that he was still in his rough-looking suit, minus the helmet, which he didn't remember removing before passing out. Wyatt shook his head and gave up on figuring out what happened and moved faster. It didn't take him long to reach the end of the alleyway he was in. It was the middle of a bustling afternoon in New York City, where throngs of commuters navigated the busy streets, each individual lost in their own thoughts and routines. The sounds of honking horns and distant chatter filled the air, creating an effortless symphony of urban life. Amidst this chaos, a brief flash of light flickered unnoticed behind a large trash bin in the alleyway. Wyatt, now clad in comfortable, casual clothing, stood at the edge of the alleyway entrance, taking a moment to stretch his weary, bruised muscles. As he looked around his surroundings, he absorbed the vivid colors of shop signs and the rhythm of pedestrians rushing by. "Looks like I'm in Brooklyn," he said before hissing. "Shit. I hurt all over." Wyatt rubbed his tired eyes and released a heavy sigh. The hazy memory of his confrontation with a large godlike being was still fresh in his mind. It was hard to differentiate whether or not that was a dream or not. What the hell was that? Some kind of vision? Or maybe it was a dream. Whatever it was, it can't bode well for me. Okay, time to head home for a nice long nap. A man with an eye patch covering his left eye stood resolutely within the brightly lit surveillance and intelligence gathering room of the Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement, and Logistics Division. The room hummed with a low buzz of technology and flickering screens that displayed a wealth of data on threats and operations worldwide. His expression was tight and collected, showcasing a lifetime of experience in high-stakes situations. This man was Nicholas Joseph Fury, the formidable director of S.H.I.E.L.D., known for his no-nonsense demeanor and strategic mind. Beside him, looking equally focused but with a hint of warmth in his demeanor, was Phil Coulson, Nick's trusted right-hand man. Coulson was a highly decorated agent, respected for his tactical prowess and unwavering loyalty. He stood ready with a wealth of knowledge and insight, prepared to support Fury. "Care to repeat that?" Nick Fury asked in a tight voice. The small team composed of researchers and surveillance specialists all flinched at the man's icy tone. "Why yes, sir. We believe the individual known as Atomic appears to possess the ability to create or manipulate matter in his surroundings, allowing him to generate a variety of objects or materials at will." This observation was reported by a young analyst who, while addressing his superior, conveyed his findings with a sense of urgency. He provided this information while rapidly documenting details on his tablet. With a swipe of his finger, footage of the battle in Harlem started playing on the large wall-sized monitor in a high-tech room. The video primarily highlighted Atomic's powers, showcasing his ability to fly and manipulate his surroundings to his advantage. Upon analyzing some of the wheelchairs, stretchers, and objects that Atomic created during the battle in Harlem, it was observed that the materials used in their various constructions were found to be equal in quality to their man-made counterparts. If not purer in quality, the young man noted, this and the videographic evidence of Atomic transmuting an entire bus into bubbles leads us to believe that Atomic can manipulate and transform anything he wishes, Phil said with astonishment. "That's dangerous," Nick cut in, gaining everyone's complete attention. That explains how Atomic was able to create Emil Blonsky's adamantium restraints and those spikes he left on the streets. That material is one of the rarest and most difficult things to manipulate on the planet, and he just whipped it out of thin air like it was nothing. Actually, it seemed that he used the concrete as a, "Sorry. I'll shut up now," the young man said without thinking, only to quickly quiet down once Nick's gaze fell on him. If Atomic can change the atoms of anything he wishes, the very world itself is his playground, Phil said. Is he capable of manipulating living matter? We don't know if he can or can't yet, a brown-haired woman said meekly. He didn't seem to have changed or affected any part of Blonsky's body during the confrontation, but if our theories on his abilities are correct, then there's no reason why he couldn't affect living matter. In theory, he could wave his hand and erase someone from existence. He's almost like a god, another researcher said with a fascinated look before grimacing as his colleagues stared at him. "I mean, sorry. Nick glared at the researcher and glanced back at the footage still playing on the monitor. His lone eye focused on Atomic's helmet, almost as if he concentrated enough, the figure's hidden identity would be revealed to him. Coulson, form a specialized team and find out Atomic's identity. I want to know who he is and where he sleeps, Nick said and made to leave the room. Yes, Director. Phil nodded and turned back to the footage. He watched as Atomic flew and moved, not to fight the abomination, but to help those around him. As Phil watched Atomic save several lives, he had a feeling deep within him that Atomic wasn't a threat. His instincts were telling him that the man behind the helmet could be a force for good. Eric Magnus Laneshare, better known as Magneto, stood with an air of quiet authority in a sprawling, opulent room adorned with dark wooden furniture and rich velvet drapes. The faint glow from the massive screen before him illuminated his intense gaze as he scrutinized the chaos captured in the footage from the recent battle in Harlem. His hands were clasped behind his back, a posture that exuded both confidence and contemplation. As he watched the two titans, Hulk and the Abomination, clash with a ferocity that shook the ground, his focus remained unwavering, fixated solely on Atomic. The powerful displays of raw strength and destruction from the gamma-powered titans were mere background noise to him. It was the enigmatic figure of Atomic that commanded his full attention. Each movement, each flicker of energy, drew Magneto deeper into a mental analysis of the hero's potential powers and possible skills. He's the one that you saw flying away from Charles's school, Eric stated. Behind him, a woman with blue skin and orange-red hair nodded. Yes, he's the one. Mystique nodded. What amazing potential he has. Indeed. It leaves me to wonder why Charles let him go. Eric frowned and watched as Atomic created chains made of adamantium to bind the abomination. What an incredible gift. I've already begun a search for Atomic. With him on the side of the Brotherhood, our goals for this world could come to fruition sooner rather than later. Mystique said, her eyes glued on how Atomic held Abomination in place with just his hand. Use any method to recruit Atomic to our cause. He must not fall into any other faction. Eric said with a dark glare under his red and purple helmet. Understood. I will not fail. Mystique smiled and left the room, leaving Eric alone. You will be one of my spears to take down the false wall of superiority that humanity has erected. Atomic, Eric said, his gray steely eyes locked on Atomic's helmet. 2 months later. A now 16-year-old Wyatt navigated around a group of tourists who were taking pictures, their laughter providing a cheerful backdrop to his morning workout. He felt light on his feet, each stride bringing him deeper into the city's heart, where the iconic architecture rose majestically. As he jogged past Central Park, the expansive greenery provided a beautiful contrast to the surrounding concrete jungle. He could hear the distant laughter of children and the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. He pushed himself to maintain a steady pace, his heart racing but steady, thanks to his daily physical training over the past 2 months, granting him much greater strength and stamina than when he first woke up to this new world. Just a few more blocks, he muttered to himself as he navigated through the maze of streets. As he continued, the world around him became a passing blur, the honks of taxis, the chatter of pedestrians, and the distant sound of a street performer strumming a lively tune. Jogging past food vendors hawking hot dogs and pretzels, he couldn't help but smile. With his mental finish line just a few blocks ahead, Wyatt's spirits soared. He sprinted the last stretch, exhilaration coursing through him as he crossed the invisible finish line of his routine, annoying some commuters as he brushed past them. Watch it, you punk. A New Yorker eating a bagel yelled. Sorry. Wyatt called out and ran away. As he ran, he passed by an electronics store with several televisions in the storefront. On their screens, various live news channels were visible. It's been 2 months since the attack in Harlem that left it in tatters. There have been no more sightings of those involved. A female reporter said as she pointed to the still-in-progress rebuilding efforts in Harlem. Yeah, There was this guy dressed up like some Power Ranger or something. He just swooped in and began fighting that big, ugly guy out of nowhere. It's true. I was there. A homeless man said with wide eyes. The sudden refilling of the 400-foot bottomless pit on 125th Street in Harlem has left city officials and residents bewildered. The deep hole that was once blocked off by around-the-clock police watch has completely disappeared after a single night. Almost as if it was never there to begin with, a male newscaster said as before and after images of the street that once held the large hole where the abomination fell were no longer there. I don't know if you're seeing this, Atomic. But I want to thank you for saving my life. I was the one you helped from. A young woman with a light bruise on her head said as she stood in front of the Apollo Theater. The recent leaks of footage from security cameras and smartphones during the Harlem attack have thrust the Hulk, Abomination, and the new heroic figure known as Atomic into the spotlight. Amid the chaos and destruction, it was Atomic's courageous actions and relentless rescue efforts that have captured the hearts of many New Yorkers. Videos shared online by witnesses showcased his remarkable bravery as he navigated the perilous scene to help those in danger. As a result, a growing number of residents were now fascinated by this emerging hero, eager to learn more about the man behind the helmet. As time passed on, the public's hunger for information about Atomic only grew, with many eagerly scanning the news and the sky, hoping for another glimpse of the enigmatic figure. However, much to their dismay, Atomic had yet to make another reappearance. His mysterious absence led to a gradual decline in the public's fervor and interest, but discussions about him continued to thrive across platforms like YouTube, Twitter, and a range of other social media channels. Debates raged on as passionate voices clashed over whether he was a hero championing justice or a perilous vigilante operating outside the law. Some speculated about Atomic's origins, with whispers suggesting he might be a mutant, a notion that stirred animosity among those who harbored deep-seated prejudices against mutants. These sentiments fueled a growing call from certain factions within the community, demanding his arrest and raising questions about the implications of his powers on society as a whole. All this attention was the reason for Wyatt to lay low and keep his usage of his powers under wraps in fear of those in S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra, or whatever other organizations out there from finding him. This didn't mean that Wyatt had completely set aside his powers. He had taken to pushing himself to train harder than ever, determined to enhance his skills and strength. This was what led him to an old abandoned warehouse in a forgotten part of Brooklyn, far removed from prying eyes, where Wyatt explored the full extent of his potential, working tirelessly to refine his skills and unlock new skills to add to his ever-growing repertoire. The intense confrontation with Abomination served as a crucial awakening for Wyatt. The sheer ferocity of the fight made him realize that in a world teeming with superpowered beings, he couldn't choose to live his life in a lackadaisical manner. He'd end up dead if he did. Especially now that a large growing number of individuals knew he existed. Or at least, that Atomic existed. With this knowledge, he understood that he needed to evolve, both physically and mentally. While Wyatt could return to his peaceful days and never put on his metaphorical cape again, he knew he couldn't. Not after that night when he had stepped in to help all those people from Abomination. It was during his battle in Harlem when Wyatt helped an old man with a broken leg onto a stretcher that he realized he had a gift. No, a responsibility. A responsibility to use his powers to help those in need. And with his abilities, it would be practically effortless. But to do so, it meant that he would have to put his helmet and cape back on. That would naturally bring the attention of several different groups and individuals with different agendas, whether those be nefarious or positive. This meant Wyatt had to be ready. While his main intentions were to help people, he knew conflict would eventually find him. Any future encounter could turn deadly at any moment, and without a solid grasp of his abilities, he risked ending up injured or even losing his life. With this in mind, Wyatt was determined to refine his powers, dedicating himself to training rigorously each day. He immersed himself in honing his skills and practicing his techniques and strategies until his abilities became second nature. Even with each new day being busy with training and practice, It didn't help his nerves knowing that there was also a possibility of some powerful entity overseeing Wyatt's progress. "You must grow stronger," Wyatt, the powerful being, had said. "If you fail to do so, then everyone's efforts would have been in vain." Wyatt was left confused at its words. There was so much to unpack in what it said that he didn't know where to start. He settled for the easiest aspect of its words: getting stronger. With his abilities, Wyatt knew that his potential was practically limitless. Unlike the Invincible universe, Wyatt wasn't held back by any external force, like writers. At least, he sincerely hoped that was the case. He couldn't be so sure considering he was now living in the Marvel universe. Still, in the Invincible universe, Adam Eve was limited to whatever the writers wanted at the time, despite her reality-warping powers. This usually meant that she wasn't allowed to outshine the series' main titular character. Invincible, aka Mark Grayson. Adam Eve could have always ended any fight she entered instantly if the writers allowed her. But they didn't, otherwise, Mark wouldn't have been able to shine. But in his new world, Wyatt wasn't hampered by anyone. He had the liberty of growing as strong as he wished, so long as he worked hard for it. Another aspect to Wyatt's growing skills and power was his imagination and knowledge. His imagination was expansive, enhanced by the memories of various fictional worlds from another life. When it came to learning, Wyatt's powerful new brain was prepared to absorb any new information he encountered or read, which came easily thanks to his built-in eidetic memory, which was what allowed him to remember the countless atomic structures and molecular makeups of everything known to mankind. With his eidetic memory, he was able to absorb any piece of knowledge he desired. With this ability, he used any of the free time from his training to read and study up on anything he could get his hands on, making him a regular at the New York Public Library. Back to the present, Wyatt used a towel from his backpack to wipe off the built-up sweat from his run off his face. Now walking at a leisurely pace, he eventually reached a small coffee shop, where he bought a bagel with cream cheese and an iced coffee. Once he took a seat at a free table outside, he took out a sketchbook and flipped to his latest entry. On the page was a meticulously crafted sketch of a vibrant red and white superhero suit, combining design elements reminiscent of Adam Eve, Invincible, and Omni-Man's iconic costumes. The suit featured an array of intricate details that highlighted the advanced materials used in each part of its construction. Such materials included a carbon fiber weave, which promised both flexibility and strength, and a layer of graphene for added durability and resilience. Overlaying this was a luxurious silk exterior that offered a sleek, polished finish, catching the light from various angles. To ensure maximum protection for his vital areas, the suit incorporated several thin plates of adamantium strategically placed to shield the head and torso without compromising mobility. Despite the adamantium plates' incredible durability, Wyatt was well aware of their weak ability to absorb the shock of any physical attack. Even so, they would offer him incredible defense. Every aspect of the design was carefully considered, from the aerodynamic contours that enabled swift movement in flight to the reinforced seams intended to withstand intense combat. Grinning at his design, Wyatt took a bite of his bagel and leaned back. "Ready or not, world. Here I come."
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.